Chapter 2041. Xianyuan Luan was speechless for a long time upon seeing this terrifying scene. Even a god of creation wouldn't be able to unleash such a powerful attack. F***ck, if every member of the 10,000 Spirits Immortal sect had one of these bombs, then they wouldn't have to be afraid of anyone. They could just throw a bomb at anyone who didn't want to submit to them. However, he knew that this wasn't very realistic. Even though these bombs were his son's, they were still weapons prepared by Bai Ling. They were things that she had expended countless precious resources to create, and there were only 1,000 of them in storage, so there was no way they could be mass-produced. Now that he had used all of these bombs, his son's savings had all been used up by him. Even though it was very satisfying to blow them up, he was still a little embarrassed. Sect leader, these bombs are so powerful. Do we have more? Let's blow up all of the snow demon beasts outside. A white-haired peak leader exclaimed with an excited expression. Xianyuan Luan's lips twitched as he clasped his hands behind his back, not wanting to say anything. If he had more, he would have taken them out already. The explosion of 1,000 bombs created a golden halo of light that enveloped the entire 10,000 Spirits Immortal sect, incinerating all the snow demon beasts that dashed into it. The berserk snow demon beasts seemed to have calmed down. They stopped in their tracks and stared at the destructive energy before them. Thank goodness we've stopped these monsters. All hail the sect leader. The tens of thousands of disciples were all extremely elated after surviving this ordeal. Xianyuan Luan also heaved a sigh of relief as a smile appeared on his face. He had thought that they were really going to die here, but his son's bombs had worked wonders. Not only had they killed over 10 million snow demon beasts, but they had also stopped them from advancing. You look very happy. A voice that sounded like ice shards colliding into each other sounded. Xianyuan Luan's hair stood on end as he gripped the ancient sword in his hand and slashed behind him. Crack! A huge golden hand with crimson claws instantly grabbed onto the ancient sword's blade. The powerful sword intent caused the huge hand to shatter into pieces, but it was unable to sever the hand. Xianyuan Luan's expression shifted drastically. His opponent had caught his sword with his bare hands? He saw the face of the newcomer clearly. It was still the sinister face of a demon. It was the appearance of a snow ghost beast, but its fur was golden, and there was a blue divine halo on its head. Before Xianyuan Luan had a chance to react, he felt a burst of excruciating pain in his chest. He found that a crimson claw had already pierced through his chest, and the extreme frost power began to quickly freeze his body, blood, and soul before completely destroying his life. The snow ghost beast grinned. Are you happy now? To be able to taste death in its truest form and feel your life slowly slipping away, this should be a very happy thing, right? It pulled its crimson claws out of Xianyuan Luan's body, and blood splattered everywhere before freezing into dark red ice crystals in midair. At this time, Xianyuan Luan's skin was already covered with a layer of frost. This cold energy came from inside his body. One could imagine how badly his body was injured. Sect leader! Damn it, I'll kill you! The powerful elders all flew into a rage upon seeing their sect leader being attacked, and they unleashed a series of powerful spell techniques toward the snow ghost beast. The snow ghost beast harumphed coldly and kicked Xianyuan Luan off the mountain peak before breaking all of the attacks with its claws. He was able to block all of the elders' attacks just by himself. In its eyes, Xianyuan Luan was already a dead man. He had been struck by the power of the heavenly god, which was imbued with the power of freezing. There was no chance of survival. It was also at this moment that two huge holes were torn open in the golden energy barrier of the 10,000 Spirits Immortal sect, and a horde of snow ghost beasts continued to pour into the holes. In the center of the ice cave, there were two more golden-furred snow ghosts. The hope of the 10,000 Spirits Immortal sect disciples and elders was once again reduced to despair. How were they supposed to fight? The snow ghost stepped onto the main peak of the 10,000 Spirits Immortal Sect, and the mountain peak quickly froze over. Bright blue ice began to spread, and a frozen mountain peak was formed in the blink of an eye. Light is king and all things are void. The snow ghost beast spread open its arms, and an aura of extreme frost spread outward in a frenzy like a shockwave. It was clearly trying to freeze all of the living beings of the 10,000 Spirits Immortal Sect to death. Right at this moment, a galaxy of stars suddenly appeared at the peak of the sky. Immediately afterward, an energy cannon that seemed to be imbued with a boundless galaxy of stars shot through the sky and crashed heavily into the snow ghost beast's body. The shock waves from the explosion even completely annihilated the main peak. Everyone was stunned by this sudden turn of events. Immediately afterward, a gargantuan battleship leaped out from the sky. An extremely handsome man in a white robe embraced Xianyuan Luan, who had crashed to the ground. His body trembled lightly as he felt the frosty chill emanating from Xianyuan Luan's body. "Father, I'm sorry. I'm late." Xianyuan Luan's lips twitched with difficulty as he looked at the familiar face before him. "No, you're not late. The core of the 10,000 Spirit Tai Chi formation hasn't been broken yet, so the humans of the Kingdom of the Nine States can still be saved." Tears welled up in Xianyuan Cheng's eyes upon hearing this, and he hugged his father even tighter, as if he were hoping that the warmth of his body could warm up his father's lifeless body. The snow ghost beast's fur was charred black, and it leaped out from the cannon blast before roaring at the gargantuan battleship in the sky. "Who is it?" "The 4-9 Immortal Sect." A cold voice reverberated throughout heaven and earth. Bai Ling stood at the forefront of the battleship in a white dress, as if she were a holy lotus. All of the 10,000 Spirits Immortal Sect disciples and elders were almost moved to tears upon hearing this. "That's the Starfire battleship. It's the 4-9 Immortal Sect. The 4-9 Immortal Sect really is here. This is great." The 4-9 Immortal Sect had maintained an undefeated record in the past 100 battles. Their existence represented the hope of the Kingdom of the Nine States in resisting the heavenly human tribe, as well as the hope for the human race to rise again. As long as the 4-9 Immortal Sect's main force was present, everyone would feel a boundless sense of security. Sigh. It's a pity that our sect leader, some of the elders were still grief-stricken and regretful. "Do you really think a mere battleship can stop us snow ghost beasts?" The golden-furred snow ghost beast roared, and millions of icicles appeared behind it, covering the entire sky. "The 4-9 Immortal Sect? Light once said that you are the biggest obstacle to our invasion of the Kingdom of the Nine States. I really want to see just how powerful the 4-9 Immortal Sect is." Another snow ghost beast that was constructing a cave of ice chuckled coldly. "Kill all of these people and we'll be victorious." A snow ghost beast wielding an icy blue skeleton staff roared as the cave of ice eroded the golden energy barrier even further. "Snow ghost, snow ghost, snow ghost." Countless snow ghost beasts charged toward the 10,000 Spirits Immortal Sect with ferocious expressions on their faces. The number of snow ghost beasts had been reduced by over 10 million, but there were still over 60 million of them left. This was a powerful force that could crush any top-rate Immortal Sect. 2 Dao Integration Stage True Dragons were already pouncing toward the snow ghost beast. The demonic blood Kirin reappeared in the sky and crashed toward the snow ghost beast with unparalleled heaven-crushing divine might. Snow ghost beasts? Could they be the culprit behind all of this? Mengji asked softly as she looked at the ferocious beasts charging toward them. "No, the culprit is the heavenly light goddess, or perhaps I should say the purple star." Shangguan Yi heaved a faint sigh as a complex expression appeared on her face. However, she also pounced toward one of the golden-furred snow ghost beasts. Bai Ling stood at the forefront of the battleship with a solemn expression on her face. Countless streams of information flashed through her eyes as she analyzed the situation. There were a total of 3 snow ghost beasts with divine halos above their heads on the battlefield. Each of them possessed combat prowess comparable to a heavenly god, which was equivalent to the heavenly ant god. They were clearly also heavenly gods that had been created through some special method. This was definitely the work of the heavenly light goddess. The heavenly light goddess had most likely planned a pincer attack from the north and the south, but she didn't expect the heavenly ant god to die so quickly. However, even with only the northern forces attacking, the situation was still extremely dire. The Eastern Front army was bearing down on the city, and the Kingdom of the Nine States was unable to spare any more troops. The only ones who could stop them were the 4-9 Immortal Sect, and this was the true test for the 4-9 Immortal Sect. Chapter 2042. A storm was brewing on the battlefield. The battle between the 4-9 Immortal Sect and the Snow Ghost Beasts had already erupted. Xian Yuancheng was still bidding farewell to Xian Yuanluan for the last time. Never would he have thought that such a powerful father would fall one day. Only when this day finally arrived did he realize that it was too late to do anything. All he could do was grieve. Cheng, your bombs are so powerful. I didn't agree to you playing with bombs back then, but I was wrong. Continue to persevere on your path. Xian Yuanluan stroked Xian Yuancheng's cheek as he spoke with difficulty. Tears welled up in Xian Yuancheng's eyes, and he nodded relentlessly. Father, I'll take you back to the battleship. Bai Ling knows a lot about technology, so she'll definitely be able to cure you. Xian Yuanluan shook his head with a wry smile. There's no need for that. I know my own body very well. My life force has already been frozen and torn apart. I'm only able to talk to you because I cultivate the Tao of myriad spirit Tai Chi and forcibly retain a wisp of my soul. My soul will soon dissipate. Xian Yuancheng gritted his teeth. He was also a cultivator in this area, so he was well aware of this. However, he really didn't want to give up. Son, go, fight alongside your friends, fight for the human race. Xian Yuanluan turned to Xian Yuancheng with a smile on his face. He wanted to raise a hand to caress his handsome face, only to find that his limbs had already become so rigid that he couldn't even move. Father! Xian Yuancheng couldn't repress his tears any longer. Son! Xian Yuanluan was also very reluctant to part with his son. PFFF. A little red flower suddenly appeared in Xian Yuanluan's heart. Father! Xian Yuancheng was given a fright. Ah! Is this what death feels like? It's so warm. Xian Yuanluan's eyes were glazed over. What death? I think you can still be saved. Why are you giving up? A sweet voice suddenly sounded in Xian Yuanluan's ears. Xian Yuanluan immediately sensed that something was amiss. He glanced at Xian Yuancheng's expression, and then glanced at the little red flower that was located right in front of his heart. Then, his mouth fell open in shock. I can feel my life force flowing back to me? A look of ecstasy appeared on Xian Yuancheng's face, and he was so excited that his voice began to tremble. Little Red, my father can still be saved. My father can still be saved, right? I can save him. There's the power of light and the power of ice in there, both of which I can nullify. I can also forcibly use the power of light to gather the life force that just dissipated, but I can't leave Xian Yuanluan's body, so I can't fight during this period of time. Put me and him back on the Starfire battleship, Xiao Hong said in her sweet voice. All right. Xian Yuancheng heaved a long sigh of relief before carrying Xian Yuanluan toward the Starfire battleship. Xian Yuanluan was still in a state of disbelief. He was the person who knew his own body better than anyone else, and he also understood the nature of life. He had thought that he was going to die for sure, and even if he had 9 lives, he was going to die anyway. However, a flower from the 4-9 Immortal Sect was telling him that he could still be saved? This feeling was like a dream. The 4-9 Immortal Sect was a place where miracles could be created. This saying had been circulating throughout the Tai Chu continent for a very long time, and he had finally experienced it for himself. The battle between the 4-9 Immortal Sect and the Snow Ghost Beasts had already erupted. Xiao Tu and Xiao Zhe took on one golden snow ghost beast, the Great Empress and Shangguan Yi took on the other golden snow ghost beast, and the demonic blood Kirin and Little Huang took on the other golden snow ghost beast. However, all of the Dao integration stage super mighty figures of the 4-9 immortal sect were at a disadvantage, without exception. After all, their opponent was a heavenly god who possessed the powers of the heavenly gods. They weren't the ancient dragon empress, so how could they resist the might of a heavenly god with their Dao integration stage power? At this moment, powerful snow ghost beasts began to pour into the huge blue hole. The several hundred cultivators from the 4-9 immortal sect and tens of thousands of cultivators from the 10,000 spirits immortal sect also braced themselves for battle. This was going to be a vicious battle. In the southern region of the Kingdom of the Nine State, Autumn Leaf City had just experienced the baptism of war. Suddenly, a bolt of lightning fell from the sky. Boom, boom, boom. The lightning covered an area of several thousand kilometers and slowly spread toward the Kingdom of the Nine States. All of the residents in the city began to flee in panic. Some of the residents who couldn't get away in time were reduced to ashes along with their houses. All of the cultivators in the city were completely powerless to do anything. The lightning seemed to have come from the deepest part of the heavens, and it crashed down with devastating power. No one could defend themselves against it, and the only thing they could do was run. Yutong City. The army also began to descend upon the city. This was the first time the heavenly human tribe had taken the initiative after Enlin and Su Xiaolan had appeared, and they had mobilized the largest army in history to the tune of 200 million. As far as the eye could see, the sky and the earth were densely packed with bird-like heavenly humans. They were like a massive white wave that reached into the heavens, and it was an extremely terrifying sight to behold. Enlin stood atop the city wall and listened to one urgent report after another from his voice transmission talisman. The West Sea army of 70 million was charging toward the immortal land above water, and tsunamis hundreds of thousands of feet long surged into the heavens. All of the major powers in the central region of the Taichu continent were struck by devastating earthquakes, and hundreds of millions of living beings were either killed or injured. Mysterious divine lightning suddenly fell from the southern region of the Kingdom of the Nine States, sweeping away everything in its path. Snow ghost beasts had appeared in the northern region of the Kingdom of the Nine States, and the Dark Phoenix imperial family had been destroyed. All of the sects were sending reinforcements to the 10,000 spirits immortal sect. A heavenly human tribe army of 100 million was bearing down on the eastern region of the Kingdom of the Nine States. One report after another made him sigh with emotion. The final battle had finally arrived. Even though he had been hoping for this moment to arrive, Enlin was still very nervous when it finally did. He had to face the paramount heavenly gods no matter what. The ancient dragon empress had already returned to the land of eternal light, and all of the members of the Divine Essence Pavilion had also made significant progress in their cultivation. However, all of the immortals from the Divine Source continent still felt their legs give out from under them at the sight of the army in the distance. Holy sh*t, this was way too insane. A heavenly human tribe army of several tens of millions was already unimaginable, but now there were 200 million of them. The Divine Essence Pavilion had gathered all of the most powerful beings on the Divine Source continent, but they wouldn't even be able to hold off an army of 20 million, let alone dominate this battlefield. Not only were the Divine Source continent mighty figures astonished, but even the allied army of the Taichu continent was also feeling extremely unsettled. Even though they had already secured all types of victories and their morale was extremely high, only when the paramount heavenly gods launched their final battle did they realize just how terrifying the iceberg hidden beneath the seawater was. Just how terrifying was that power? The paramount heavenly gods were extremely enraged that their plans had been disrupted, but the source of their rage was the fact that their 99% chance of victory had become 99%. Papa was still their papa. All of a sudden, Many powerful beings and mighty figures in Yutong City turned toward the white-robed man standing atop the city wall. He had already become a pillar of support for many people. He was the hero of the human race and the war god of the Tai Chu continent. It was exactly because of his presence that many powerful beings still held a lot of hope for the upcoming battle. That's right, he was the sect leader of the 4-9 Immortal sect, Unlin. Unlin's expression was still as calm and collected as ever, and many of the mighty figures were quite relieved to see this. What was he thinking about right now? He wasn't thinking about anything. He was in a daze. At this moment, the heart of the sea clone that Unlin was wearing suddenly lit up. He surreptitiously accepted the call and transmitted his voice. "Brother C, I've been waiting for your call for a long time. Brother Unlin, I've missed you too. Let's get straight to the point. I have something very important to tell you," the heavenly sea god said in a grave voice. "What is it?" "Light, Earth and I have set a target, and we're going to kill you within 10 days. Unlin. Chapter 2043. Take my life in 10 days? Unlin was completely dumbfounded upon hearing this. What kind of vendetta was this? Why were they in such a hurry to take his life? Cyril wasn't going to be killed? Chun Chun wasn't going to be killed. He had only slain a bunch of heavenly gods and destroyed 2 heavenly gates. Did they really have to go to this extent? Unlin had 1,000 things to say, but he had to calm himself down. Why are you in such a hurry to kill me? Why do you have to do it in 10 days? Could it be that I'll become super bad *SS after 10 days? Unlin voiced out his doubts. The heavenly sea god gave him a brief recount of the deal that the heavenly sea god and the heavenly heaven god had made with the heavenly life god and the heavenly heaven god. As for why they had to kill Unlin in 10 days, even the heavenly sea god didn't know. However, they couldn't refuse such a massive army. Unlin finally understood why so many heavenly human tribe United Nations armies had suddenly appeared on the eastern and central front. It turned out that the heavenly life god and the heavenly heaven god had also mobilized their armies. However, he really couldn't understand why those 2 heavenly gods were willing to pay such a heavy price to kill him. He didn't feel like he had anything to do with those 2 heavenly gods. The heavenly sea god felt like the 2 paramount heavenly gods were afraid of Unlin. They were afraid that Unlin would become even more powerful, so they wanted to kill Unlin. The heavenly earth god and I have already agreed to find an opportunity to kill you. Not only that, but even the heavenly life god will unleash a secret weapon to attack you. Even the heavenly earth god and the heavenly earth god don't know about this. The heavenly sea god spoke in a grave voice. Unlin understood this. He knew that the heavenly sea god had infiltrated both the heavenly earth god and the heavenly life god, so he definitely had the most information. The heavenly earth god plans to lure you to a gravitational core region and use its most powerful power of earth to suppress you. I think you should beat it at its own game and fight it there. Under normal circumstances, you'll definitely lose. However, I can tell you a few fatal flaws of the heavenly earth god. You have to gradually guide it, and so on and so on. The heavenly sea god explained his plan, and Unlin listened intently. After all, this concerned his life and death. I'll take care of the heavenly earth god like this for now. If you can't defeat it, you'll have a chance to escape. If you can defeat it, I'll also secretly deliver a lethal blow to it. This is also what life and the heavens require. The biggest variable in this battle is the heavenly life god's secret trump card. Even she is unable to grasp that trump card. She is a complete lunatic, so we have to be extremely careful in this battle. Unlin listened to the heavenly sea god's words and made a mental note of caution. He also had many trump cards, but at this moment, his heart was incomparably solemn. The level of this battle was the highest level battle he had ever fought since he started cultivating. There were a total of 3 paramount heavenly gods participating in this battle. The earth, the ocean, and the life forms all wanted to kill him, but they all had their own agendas. This battle was extremely perilous and dark, but it was also filled with hope. For some reason, his body trembled involuntarily at the thought of this, but he didn't know whether it was from fear or excitement. An Outyin had been invincible for far too long, and the blood within his body was beginning to boil in the face of such a powerful enemy that could threaten his life. All troops get ready. Heaven Punishing Formation, activate. Michael stood at the forefront of the army with his 8 wings spread wide as he yelled with his pure white holy sword in his hand. 9 Tao Integration Stage Mighty Figures, 99 Return to Void Stage Mighty Figures, and 9,999 Soul Formation Stage Mighty Figures all released their auras at the same time, which merged into the formation on the ground of Yutong City. The inner part of the formation was a black circle that encompassed a radius of over 50 kilometers, while the outer part was a white circle that encompassed a radius of over 500 kilometers. Black and white intertwined at a certain critical point, thereby creating an endless cycle of reincarnation. Not only that, but at the very center of the formation, there was a 9-colored divine light that soared straight into the clouds. It was like a sword, yet also like a spear, and it was as if it were going to pierce through the entire heavens as it exuded an unparalleled might that struck fear into all living beings' hearts. This was a god of creation stage formation left behind by a top-rate god from the Holy Paradise, the Heaven Punishing Formation. All allies that entered the formation would be able to unleash their latent potential to an extremely high degree, thereby elevating the power of all of the powerful beings in the army. Not only that, but the 9-colored divine light at the center of the formation was also a top-rate killing weapon. It was the trump card of the United Army on the Central Front, and now that the final battle had erupted, they had unleashed all of their trump cards without any reservation. There were over 90 million soldiers in the United Army on the Central Front. The main force was the powerful beings within the Heaven Punishing Formation, while the other half of the powerful beings were scattered around the battlefield, forming formations of all sizes to engage in guerrilla warfare. The 4-9 Immortal Sex Divine Essence Pavilion had also unleashed its own 100 Immortal Formation. Even though this formation couldn't attack heavenly gods, it was still more than capable of torturing Heaven Pioneer stage great generals. Aside from that, Michael, the Battling Buddha, and Yun Menjiang were the 3 heavenly disciple candidates, and all of them exuded powerful auras that were no less powerful than heavenly gods as they stood at the forefront of the army, facing their enemies head-on. 9 Tao Integration Stage Vermilion Birds also exuded boundless flames, making them appear as if they were 9 suns hanging in the sky. The war god of the human race, Enlil, and the mysterious divine phoenix maiden stood silently atop the city wall. They were the trump cards and pillars of the United Army on the Central Front. However, such a powerful lineup didn't actually make the soldiers feel any better. This was because the enemy's lineup was also extremely terrifying. If it weren't for Enlil and Su Xiaolan, they would have already been scared witless, setting aside the 200 million Heavenly Human Tribe United Army and the 30 million Creation Realm, Blood Tribe, Void Spirit Tribe, and Western Dragon United Army. There were 12 Tao Integration Stage Super Mighty Figures and over 50 Heaven Pioneer Stage Great Generals. Even the Divine Heaven Stage beings who had once been regarded as top-tier super mighty figures had 10 of them on their side. What kind of terrifying experience was this? One had to realize that on this battlefield, only the 3 heavenly disciple candidates could just barely keep the power of the heavenly gods at bay. Even if they fought to the death, they would only be able to take on 3 heavenly gods, so what about the other 7? If the 7 heavenly gods were released, then no matter how many people they had, they would all be crushed to death. This was a fundamental difference in combat prowess that couldn't be made up for with numbers. Perhaps getting Enlil and Su Xiaolan to fight was their last resort. However, if they were to rely on Enlil and Su Xiaolan, then who would be able to keep the paramount heavenly gods at bay? That's right, this battle was going to be extremely perilous and brutal. Enlin and Su Xiaolan alone wouldn't be enough. Even if everyone fought to the death, there was a very good chance that they would lose. This was something that everyone knew, but the vast majority of them still chose to fight. This was going to be an extremely difficult battle. With this in mind, Enlin turned toward the burly true demon tribe man with a large gourd on his back. Did Cyril send you here to deal with today's situation? Chapter 2044. Me. The true demon tribe man faltered slightly before pulling out the gourd on his back and downing a mouthful of wine. Ha ha! Heavenly disciple Enlin, you think too highly of me. This extremely powerful true demon tribe male was Cyril's heavenly son's attendant, Demon Emperor Cu, who was once the leader of the demon tribe. Then what are you doing here? Aren't you a trump card that Cyril sent to deal with the paramount heavenly gods? Enlin saw that Demon Emperor Cu's cultivation base was also at the Tao integration pinnacle stage. In terms of his heaven-crushing comprehension, he would definitely be able to play a huge role on the battlefield. Deal with the paramount heavenly gods? Demon Emperor Cu was given a fright and shook his head. If I had that kind of ability, I would have been a heavenly disciple a long time ago. Why would I need to serve Cyril? Then why did Cyril send you here? He sent me here? Of course it's to monitor the battlefield and find a heavenly god to fight. Demon Emperor Cu laughed heartily and downed a few mouthfuls of wine. His face was flushed red from drinking so much wine that he appeared extremely pleased with himself. Enlin was a little perplexed upon hearing this. He had thought that Demon Emperor Cu was a trump card that Cyril had sent here. Now it looked like a heavenly god ally was indeed powerful, but it was still not enough to play a crucial role in the overall battle. If Su Xiaolan and I weren't here, how were you going to turn the tables? Enlin suddenly thought of something. The heaven-crushing sect's previous plans had never included Enlin in their plans. Thus, he really couldn't think of a way to defend against such a terrifying army on the central front. Turn the tables? Demon Emperor Cu's blood-red eyes surveyed the army of nearly 100 million around him. His gaze was deep and distant. Why do you want to turn the tables? A possibility suddenly occurred to Enlin, and his pupils contracted in shock. Could it be that you didn't even think about winning this battle? Demon Emperor Cu fell silent for a moment before nodding his head lightly. Not every battle has to be won. The enemy is stronger than us to begin with, so we had no choice but to make the necessary choices. Protecting the kingdom of the 9 states, or rather, protecting the land of eternal light, is the most important thing for our heaven-crushing sect. Enlin's body trembled slightly. So, the West Sea Alliance, the Light Wing Clan, the Buddhist Kingdom, and the Holy Martial Clan are all cannon fodder in your plan? Not cannon fodder, but martyrs who protect the continent, Demon Emperor Cu replied. Enlin laughed. He could not accept this true demon tribe's words. Their battle bought time for the heaven-crushing sect. You have no idea how we felt when we chose to sacrifice ourselves in the first place. If it weren't for the fact that it's too difficult to win, why would a creation realm cultivator join a heavenly god? We even included the annihilation of our own brethren, the true demon tribe, in our plan. We had even explicitly told them about this, but they still followed Cyril and me and chose this path of crushing the heavens. Why do you think they did this? Demon Emperor Cu sighed lightly. All of our sacrifices are for the sake of crushing the heavens. We want to control our own destiny. This is the only way out for the living beings of the Tai Chu continent. He turned to Enlin with a smile as he spoke. Thankfully, you've joined the heaven-crushing sect. Now we can try to win this battle without sacrificing any of our comrade. The weak don't have any leeway to choose, but the strong give us more choices. Enlin fell silent upon hearing this. He was a little uncomfortable with the heaven-crushing sect's decision. Anyone would be uncomfortable with sacrificing their friends and comrades in the name of saving the world. However, he also knew that the heaven-crushing sect had to choose this path in order to succeed. No matter what, I'm here now, and I won't let this happen. Unlin looked at the heavenly human tribe united army with a firm expression. He was very glad that he was no longer weak. He had the power to protect his comrades and prevent them from sacrificing themselves for the sake of victory. As such, he was going to grab onto this opportunity and fight for the sake of his comrades. Boom, boom, boom. The heavens began to rumble. It was as if the wrath of the heavens were raining down upon Yutong City. Invisible might crashed down upon the united army in an attempt to completely crush their battle intent. It was also at this moment that earth-shattering booms erupted within Yutong City. Boom, boom, boom. This was the sound of war drums being beaten. Each and every one of them strengthened the morale of the allied army. The one who was beating the drums was the Holy Martial Clan's war hero Martial Lord, a Dao integration stage super mighty figure. Each and every one of his beats was imbued with boundless divine Tao battle intent and heaven-crushing true intent. It was able to resist the might of the heavens and strengthen the morale of the allied army. The pressure of the heavens was completely ineffective. Among the heavenly human tribe united army, 10 extremely mighty beings began to unleash their paramount auras. These auras converged to become extremely terrifying, as if 10 gods of creation were demonstrating their might to the powerful beings of Yutong City. The green-haired male heavenly god at the forefront was a handsome male with an extraordinary disposition, and he smiled at the united army. I am the wood of the 5 elements. A heavenly god with one side white and the other black also stepped forward, and his voice seemed to have formed a ring that reverberated throughout heaven and earth. I am the yin and yang, the manifestation of all things. All of the united army faltered upon hearing this. Why was he suddenly introducing himself? However, the self-introductions were still ongoing. An exquisitely beautiful female heavenly god with the faces of countless beautiful women on her body also spoke, and it was as if there were over 100 voices reverberating in the ears of all of the living beings present. I am the myriad of transformations, the manifestation of all things. A platinum figure who had once been beaten up by Enlin also spoke in a haughty manner. I am the temperature, the manifestation of all things. A heavenly god with a crimson scythe on his shoulder spoke in a sinister voice. I am the slaughter, the manifestation of all things. A male heavenly god with a thin, silver sword in his hand spoke in a cold voice. I am the sword, the manifestation of all things. A female heavenly god with a pair of flowing golden wings spoke in a cold voice. I have a wingspan of 9 layers, the phoenix soars in the sky. A female heavenly god with her eyes closed stroked her pipa as her voice reverberated throughout heaven and earth. My name is Wu Yin, and my heart is my voice. An exquisitely beautiful female heavenly god arrived amid a rain of flowers, and an intoxicating smile appeared on her face. I am Bai Hua, pleased to meet you. A male heavenly god with a pair of pure purple eyes spoke in a cold voice. I am Xingji. Soon, the introductions of the 10 heavenly gods were completed. The entire place fell deathly silent. Enlin and the others were at a loss for words upon hearing this self-introduction. Was this some kind of new battle etiquette? Should they introduce themselves as well? Just as these thoughts were running through his mind, the battling Buddha had already stepped forward in high spirits, and he slammed his golden-banded staff into the ground, causing the ground to tremor violently. His voice was like rumbling thunder. My name is Sun Wukong, the Sun Wukong who wreaks havoc in the heavens. The battling Buddha's self-introduction boosted the morale of the united army. All of the heavenly gods remained expressionless. The heavenly wood god glared coldly at the battling Buddha. We're introducing ourselves to you because the goddess of life wants you to know who killed you out of respect for all life forms. As for who you are, we have no interest in knowing. The battling Buddha, Enlin, everyone. Holy F***CK, what a C***T. The battling Buddha's entire body was trembling with rage. Alright, I hereby announce that all of you can die now. Accept the judgment of the heavens. The heavenly wood god waved a hand through the air, and the army of 230 million soldiers charged toward Yutong City at once. Chapter 2045. The battle finally erupted. Thunderous battle cries erupted from both sides. The battling Buddha transformed into a divine monkey over 10,000 feet in length and roared as he charged forward. He had already decided to kill the heavenly wood god with his golden-banded staff first. This heavenly wood god was so arrogant, and he was going to let the heavenly wood god know who had killed him. Let's see if he still dared to flex like this. The two armies immediately engaged in a battle of long-range spell technique. All of the 200 million heavenly human tribe powerful beings unleashed heavenly spell techniques that were pure white in color. From afar, it looked like a boundless white ocean was surging toward them. As for the spell techniques of the United Army, they were like a kaleidoscope that blotted out heaven and earth, or a dazzling sea of light that encompassed the heavens, crashing viciously into the white ocean. Boom, boom, boom. At this moment, the earth, the sky, and the void were all trembling and rumbling. Countless collisions and boundless energy exploded, transforming heaven and earth into a space of destruction. The two oceans clashed and destroyed one another, creating an unprecedentedly terrifying spectacle. Even the Return to Void stage mighty figures were struck by the feeling that they were as insignificant as tiny little boats in the ocean. All they could do was unleash spell techniques along with everyone else. As for who they were attacking, they didn't know. All they had to do was charge forward. The Heavenly Human Tribe United Army had already reached a range of over 500 kilometers. This was actually the range of the Heaven Punishing Formation. One had to realize that the Heaven Punishing Formation encompassed an area of over 500 kilometers in radius. In an instant, one terrifying energy after another, whether it was raging flames, icy blades, or destructive poisons, began to appear from the void, gushing out from the ground, and bombarding the enemies who had invaded the formation. Instantly, countless enemies fell under the attack of the formation. From the very beginning, the United Army had unleashed their God of Creation stage spell formations to whittle away at the Heavenly Human Tribe United Army's power. In particular, the powerful beings who were providing energy for the Heavenly Punishment spell formation were able to attack the Heavenly Human Tribe United Army while providing energy for the spell formation. That way, they would be able to attack their enemies to the fullest extent, thereby achieving miraculous results. Sure enough, over 5 million of the Heavenly Human Tribe United Army had already been slain by the time the United Army had reached 1 million. However, they didn't dare to let their guard down as they knew that the true battle would commence once the distance between them was closed. What they could do now was to do everything possible to use the advantage of distance to wear down the enemy's forces, the more the better. A battle between heavenly gods also erupted in the distance. They all intentionally avoided the center of the battle and chose to fight on the open battlefield. There was nothing they could do about it. Every move they made had the power to destroy the world. If they were fighting in the center of the battlefield, the accidental injuries caused by a single round would be measured in the tens of thousands. The battling Buddha had chosen to fight the heavenly wood god, and it was clear that he had attracted a lot of hatred. The heavenly wood god, on the other hand, did not care who his opponent was. In any case, his opponent would become a dead man in his hands. Yun Menjiang continued to battle her old rival, the heavenly slaughter god. The heavenly slaughter god was as despicable as ever. Unlike the other heavenly gods, he didn't avoid places where there were a lot of living beings. Instead, he chose to fight in places with the most living beings, and he reaped the lives of all living beings regardless of whether they were friend or foe. Michael chose to fight the heavenly temperature god. The heavenly temperature god had been beaten to a pulp by Enlin, and it could be said that he was on the brink of death. He was still severely wounded, and his combat prowess had decreased significantly. Michael felt like he had a chance of defeating the heavenly temperature god. As for the other 7 heavenly gods, They flew toward Yutong City like tigers pouncing on a herd of sheep. Normal attacks were completely ineffective against them. Regardless of whether it was the heaven-punishing formation or the mighty figure's attacks, none of them were able to break through their barriers of power. Wherever the heavenly flowers god passed, a rain of flower petals would fall upon her. Even though they were her enemies, many living beings were still entranced by her exquisite beauty. Dance, roses. A faint smile appeared on the heavenly flowers god's face, and she swept her sleeves through the air, sending crimson rose petals flying through the air. All of the living beings in the united army were struck by the feeling that they loved her so much that they couldn't bear to hurt her. At this moment, the crimson rose petals had already sliced through their bodies, quickly sapping their lives. All of the living beings who were wounded by the rose petals had their blood quickly sucked dry by the flower petals. When the flower petals flew out of their bodies again, they had already been reduced to dried corpses. However, such a bloody scene did not diminish the heavenly flowers god in the slightest. Instead, they felt like this heavenly goddess had become even more beautiful and alluring. What a peerless calamity! A cold voice suddenly sounded. Immediately afterward, blue flames imbued with extreme frost intent suddenly engulfed the entire area. The blue flames were imbued with extreme heaven-crushing true intent, and they were powerful enough to burn all of the oncoming roses into ashes. The heavenly 100 flowers goddess brows furrowed slightly as a pitiable expression appeared on her face. "Who is burning my flowers?" she asked in a gentle voice. Boom! The flames parted to reveal an extremely regal and proud figure. "Vermilion bird Bing Xian," the blue vermilion bird said as it fluttered its dreamy feathers. Soon, another pillar of scorching light fell. This was a vermilion bird imbued with extreme yang power. "Pretentious women like you deserve to be burned to death." She was one of the 6 vermilion bird sages, vermilion bird Tai Jing. One wing to heaven, one wing to earth, a single thought to create a cage. An illusionary vermilion bird also began to appear. Her name was Long, and she was using her wings to obstruct the heavenly flowers god's path. Her wings were semi-transparent, and they seemed to be able to warp and distort all things, making the heaven and earth around the heavenly flowers god seem to have become unreal. Soon, flaming feathers fell from the sky like the most dazzling flower petals. "Only flowers that burn are the most beautiful." A vermilion bird with pink feathers looked down at the indescribably beautiful heavenly goddess from the sky. She was the flying vermilion bird. 4 vermilion birds had surrounded the heavenly flowers god, and coincidentally, all of them were female vermilion birds. However, perhaps this was not a coincidence. They were proud and conceited, and they were also proud of their beauty and nobility. Now that such a seductive B*TCH had appeared on the battlefield, they naturally had to join forces to resist her. Apart from the great Empress Vermilion Bird, no one else was allowed to be more beautiful than them. "You're just 4 Dao integration stage vermilion birds, and you want to stop me? Do I look that weak?" The heavenly flowers god covered her face with her sleeves as tears welled up in her eyes. The 4 female vermilion birds let loose an enraged cry before pouncing toward the heavenly flowers god with boundless might. F***CK. Not only is she beautiful, but she's also so flexing. This lowly heavenly goddess must die. Chapter 2046. Heaven Punishing Hellish Flames. Holy Angel Uriel stood at a node within the heaven-punishing formation, and he suddenly spread open his arms. Dark green flames imbued with extremely powerful heaven-crushing true intent suddenly erupted from the ground in front of the heavenly human tribe united army. All heavenly humans that came into contact with the dark green flames had their feathers incinerated to ashes, and their skin was charred black. They all died extremely gruesome deaths, as if they had been plunged into hell itself. This baptism of hellish flames covered an area of over 100 kilometers, and over 1 million heavenly human tribe living beings were incinerated to death in the blink of an eye. Under normal circumstances, Uriel wouldn't have been able to unleash such a powerful spell technique. However, with the power of the heaven-punishing formation, he was able to do so. Vital energy surged violently, and he quickly recovered his energy in preparation for his next spell technique. At this moment, the space beside him was suddenly sliced in half. An invisible, terrifying being was rapidly approaching him. Windwalker? Uriel's expression shifted as he unleashed an enraged palm toward his side. Boom! A terrifying energy explosion followed the collision. Uriel's body swayed slightly, and blood trickled down the corners of his lips. His invisible body was also forced to reveal his body of wind. Who would have thought that my opponent would be you? Uriel gritted his teeth. Windwalker remained silent. They were once friends and had fought alongside each other in the past. However, they had chosen different camps, which led them to different paths in the end. All of a sudden, flames that were powerful enough to dye heaven and earth red erupted in the distance. Heavenly Phoenix God let loose an enraged roar as 5 divine halos appeared around its body. The wings on its back also transformed into 5 layers, each of which was larger than the one before it, and all of which were of different colors. Vermilion Bird Nanli, Vermilion Yu Luo, Vermilion Huanjin, Vermilion Bird Tianjin, and Vermilion Bird Shuefang roared as they pounced toward Heavenly Phoenix God. There was no other reason than the fact that the soaring Phoenix God had attracted even more hatred than the 100 Flowers God. The soaring Phoenix God's arrogant demeanor and dazzling, multi-layered wings were a provocation to the proud Vermilion Bird tribe. As a result, the soaring Phoenix God had become the target of everyone's ire. 4 of the 6 Vermilion Bird sages, who were at the Tao Integration Pinnacle stage, and one of them was at the Tao Integration Intermediate stage. Due to their fanatical worship of the great Empress Vermilion Bird, their heaven-crushing true intent was extremely close to that of a heavenly disciple candidate. Right now, the combined power of the 5 Vermilion Bird sages far exceeded that of a heavenly disciple candidate. In fact, they were even slightly more powerful than the ancient Dragon Empress. Thus, the flying Phoenix Goddess was instantly forced to unleash her 5 divine halos. This was the only ally that could force a heavenly god-level existence into a difficult battle. Empyrean God Soaring Phoenix was in a rather miserable state, but the other Empyrean gods were far more ferocious than anyone else. Empyrean God Myriad Transformations, Empyrean God Yin-Yang, Empyrean God Star Solitude, Empyrean God Soundless, and Empyrean God Sword Cloud. These 5 Empyrean gods seemed to be invincible, slaughtering all who stood in their way as they advanced towards the heart of the heaven-punishing formation. Some returned to Void stage mighty figures tried to delay them, only to be slain by a single sword strike from the soaring Phoenix God. They didn't even have a chance to retaliate. Gulp, gulp, gulp. Demon Emperor Cu looked at the oncoming heavenly gods as he continued to pour wine into his mouth. His aura was also slowly rising as he continued to drink. The aroma of wine permeated the entire space, creating a delightful aroma. Demon Emperor Cu laughed heartily. Heavenly Disciple Enlin, I'll be going first. Whoosh! A red streak of light pierced through the air. In the distance, countless Buddhist kingdom disciples were sliced in half by the rain of sword intent, resulting in extremely heavy casualties. Meanwhile, the divine spirit wielding the celestial sword was closing in on the 2 figures atop Yutong City at an extremely fast speed. He was the fastest among all the heavenly gods, not because he ran fast, but because he killed extremely quickly. All of the powerful beings who stood in his way were slain. The heavenly sword god had a mission, and that was to lure Enlin out. That man is the only one on this battlefield who can make me take him so seriously. The heavenly sword god gripped his thin sword tightly as he continued onward. His eyes were imbued with astonishing sword intent, and they pierced through the battlefield before landing on the white-robed figure atop the city wall. However, an extremely powerful aura suddenly approached him at a rapid speed, sending chills running down his spine. he unleashed his two divine halos in almost an instant. Heaven-crushing, intoxicating God Fist, a thunderous battle intent erupted. The heavenly sword god raised his thin, silver sword, and the power of the paramount laws of his two divine halos was injected into the blade of the sword. At this moment, the fist had already completely fallen. He had initially planned to use his sword to block the fist, but the rich aroma of wine suddenly wafted into his nose. He suddenly discovered that the fist before his eyes had multiplied into hundreds and thousands of fists. Was this an illusion? The heavenly sword god's expression shifted before he was crippled by the hundreds and thousands of fists. Boom, boom, boom. The heavenly sword god threw up a mouthful of blood, and his body was riddled with fist marks as he was blasted flying. All of the spectating powerful beings were astonished upon seeing this. Look at that true demon. Holy F***ck. He's so bad *SS. He sent a heavenly god flying? Is he really that powerful? He was once the most powerful being in the true demon tribe, and he's now the most powerful heavenly disciple's attendant. It makes sense that he's so powerful. Phew. I'm saved. I thought I was going to be sliced in half by the heavenly sword god. It could be said that Demon Emperor Cu's appearance had stunned the entire audience. This raised the morale of the allied army, who had been forced into a corner. The heavenly sword god was in an extremely sorry state, and he hurtled back in retreat while activating his divine halos in a frenzy. Meanwhile, Demon Emperor Cu continued his relentless pursuit, and one fist after another transformed in an unpredictable manner. The heavenly sword god didn't even have a chance to retaliate, and he could only defend himself relentlessly. Even so, there were often fists that pierced through his sword net and landed viciously on his body, striking him to the brink of collapse. Blue defense, dual power, life, eternal reality. The heavenly sword god roared in a frenzy. After activating his seventh divine halo, he was finally able to capture the trajectory of Demon Emperor Cu's attacks. The alcohol emanating from Demon Emperor Cu's body had the ability to confuse one's mind and distort reality. After activating his divine halo, the heavenly sword god was finally able to contend with Demon Emperor Cu's bizarre drunken fists. Die lightning sword. The heavenly sword god evaded Demon Emperor Cu's hammer strike, and his sword was as ethereal as the clouds as it slashed toward the true demon tribe Cultivator before him from an extremely tricky angle. Whoosh! A gash appeared on Demon Emperor Cu's muscular body, from which blood gushed forth. However, before the heavenly sword god had a chance to attack again, he discovered that a massive gourd had already appeared in the air before crashing down viciously onto his head. Bam! The heavenly sword god felt as if his head were about to explode, and his eyes rolled over into the back of his head as his body plummeted to the ground, creating a gargantuan crater. Hee, are you so happy and proud that you managed to withstand my alcohol aura? Demon Emperor Cu laughed heartily as he grabbed the red gourd and continued to pour alcohol into his mouth. Gulp, gulp, gulp. You dare to drink alcohol while fighting me? The heavenly sword god was a little dizzy from the impact, and he felt as if he had been severely insulted upon seeing this. He roared as his body rose into the sky along with his sword before slashing down toward Demon Emperor Cu. Demon Emperor Cu suddenly opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of alcohol before snapping his fingers. Boom! An earth-shattering flame burst forth from his mouth, as if it were going to incinerate the entire heavens. The heavenly sword god was unable to evade in time, and his sword intent was melted by the terrifying heaven-crushing power of the flames. His body was blasted into the ground again as his body spasmed and spasmed. I'm fighting and drinking, what does that have to do with you? Demon Emperor Cu chuckled as he raised the red gourd and continued to pour alcohol into his mouth. Gulp, gulp. Chapter 2047. A smile appeared on Enlin's face upon seeing the battle between Demon Emperor Cu and the heavenly sword god. Demon Emperor Siyu had been far too humble just then. He had said that his combat prowess was only comparable to that of a heavenly god, but the power he was displaying had already transcended that of a heavenly god. Heavenly God Yin Yang, Heavenly God Myriad Transformations, Heavenly God Wu Yin, and Heavenly God Solitary Star continued onward, slaying all of the powerful beings in their way as they quickly closed in on Enlin. Su Xiaolan's jade dress danced in the wind as she turned to look at Enlin. Enlin also turned to look at her as she slowly pulled out her dragon sparrow sword. The holy might of the vermilion bird and azure dragon erupted forth, making the heavenly god's expressions falter and space tremor violently. This stunning and alluring woman stepped out of the city wall with her dragon sparrow sword in her hand. Her back was turned toward Enlin, and just her lithe and graceful figure was enough to make one's hair stand on end. At this moment, neither of them spoke, but their words spoke louder than 1,000 words. They both knew that the only thing they wanted to talk to each other about was to stay alive. Su Xiaolan leaped lightly into the air, and her body flashed through the air like a fleeting azure shadow. In that instant, an extremely regal and holy aura formed a substantial pressure upon the heavenly human tribe united army up ahead. In that instant, the hundreds of millions of living beings on the battlefield felt as if they had seen an extremely noble, holy, and ethereal figure spreading its sky-encompassing wings and descending upon the 9 heavens. "Remember my name, Divine Phoenix Maiden." A voice that was ethereal and graceful like the tune of a celestial being carried along vast and eternal might as it rumbled down. The heavenly human tribe united army that was charging toward Su Xiaolan suddenly faltered. A terrifying bloodline might made their bodies tremble violently, and those with weaker cultivation bases even self-detonated on the spot, while those with more powerful cultivation bases were completely immobilized. She tore through the heavens and flew directly toward the heavenly god Myriad Transformations. All of the beautiful faces on the heavenly god Myriad Transformations body smiled in unison upon seeing this. All of them were extremely beautiful, but they were all smiling at the same time, creating a particularly sinister and eerie spectacle. You've finally come out. All we have to do now is stop you, Rumble." Before the Myriad Transformations heavenly god could finish speaking, Su Xiaolan ruthlessly pressed down with a single hand, mercilessly slapping the smiling Empyrean to the ground. "Don't even think about escaping." Su Xiaolan's beautiful eyes widened as she stared at the aloof Empyrean god Star Solitary. She stomped down on the void with the tip of her foot, causing it to instantly shatter and distort. Her body shot forth like a dragon, tearing through the air for 150 kilometers before arriving directly in front of heavenly god Solitary Star. She twisted her body, and her long, well-proportioned legs swept toward heavenly god Solitary Star's chest. In that instant, the holy image of an azure dragon swinging its tail appeared between heaven and earth. It was an earth-shattering collision. Heavenly god Solitary Star had his arms crossed in front of his chest, but he was still knocked flying for over 500 kilometers by Su Xiaolan's mighty kick. He was completely unable to completely block her attack. Gasp! The Divine Phoenix Maiden managed to hold off 2 heavenly gods? And they're 2 heavenly gods who are so far away from each other. That's insane. Even though the United Army already knew that Su Xiaolan was extremely powerful, they were still astonished to see her again. However, to everyone's astonishment, Su Xiaolan sprang into action again after kicking heavenly god Solitary Star away. This time, she pounced toward heavenly god Silent Yin. "My god, she's trying to hold off 3 heavenly gods in a row? That's insane. I'm afraid that's not all. Did you see God An's expression? He's completely unprepared for battle. I feel like the Divine Phoenix Maiden is trying to hold off all 4 heavenly gods." As soon as he said this, many experts and mighty figures sucked in a breath of cold air. In the eyes of all living beings, heavenly gods were paramount beings. All of them were powerful enough to destroy an entire realm, But now, Su Xiaolan was trying to hold off 4 heavenly gods on her own? Without a doubt, this was a magnificent feat that had never been done before in history. Even though heavenly god Silent Yin's eyes were closed, she had already begun to retreat as soon as Su Xiaolan pounced toward her. At the same time, her slender hands quickly danced over the strings of her pipa as a burst of ethereal heavenly music proliferated through heaven and earth, forming a substantial energy barrier. Lonely string echo. She opened her pink lips and uttered an extremely pleasing syllable. Countless golden syllables formed a series of energy chords that enshrouded her entire body. At this moment, a flaming sword projection imbued with the power of the vermilion bird had already descended upon her before striking her defensive barrier. This was an extremely terrifying attack, but heavenly god Silent Yin was able to nullify most of the sword projection's power through the use of sound. Shapeless sound, string strike. Heavenly god Silent Yin blocked Su Xiaolan's sword strike before quickly plucking the strings of her pipa, upon which a peerlessly sharp blade imbued with the sound of the great Tao shot forth. The blade sliced through the air and pierced directly toward Su Xiaolan's heart. Heavenly god Silent Yin appeared to be quite frail and delicate, but she had mastered one of the most powerful killing techniques among heavenly gods. A surprised expression appeared on Su Xiaolan's face. She clearly didn't think that a heavenly god would be able to block her sword strike. She was just about to unleash a second sword strike when her heart suddenly jolted. She had detected heavenly god Silent Yin's attack through the vermilion bird heart essence. Her body abruptly shifted to the side, immediately following which the invisible attack swept past her original position, sending forth an almost undetectable ripple. The attack easily sliced open the jade dress around her arm, upon which a tiny gash appeared on her snowy white arm. What a powerful attack! An expression of shock appeared on Su Xiaolan's face. Even though her combat prowess was comparable to that of a god of creation, heavenly god Silent Yin still struck her with a sense of danger. Heavenly gods were beings that were fully acknowledged by the heavenly Tao, and there really were no weaklings among them. She evaded it? An expression of incredulity appeared on heavenly god Silent Yin's face. This was her most powerful killing technique, and it was usually extremely effective the first time it was used. However, Su Xiaolan had evaded it, and Su Xiaolan was prepared for the following attacks, so it would be even more difficult for her to kill Su Xiaolan with a single strike. Heavenly god Silent Yin was only momentarily dazed before a divine sword enshrouded in lightning and flames appeared before her. Heaven-crushing dragon sparrow. Thousand sound strings. Countless strands of pipa music clashed violently with the might of the dragon sparrow. Heaven and earth were instantly torn into countless pieces by the sound strings, and the power of the azure dragon and vermilion bird exploded violently, engulfing all of the living beings in the area. Heavenly god Silent Yin's frail and delicate body flew back from the explosion, and her clothes were in tatters as she threw up a mouthful of blood. The energy from the explosion seemed to have a life of its own as it parted to reveal a figure in an azure dress. Su Xiaolan's azure dragon revolved around her body, and a pair of vermilion bird wings appeared on her back. She stood in mid-air like a peerless goddess, and she was completely unscathed. She had unleashed the essential power of the vermilion bird and the power of the azure dragon at the same time, revealing just the tip of the iceberg to the heavenly gods. Chapter 2048. Su Xiaolan was just about to attack the fourth heavenly god when the sound of something being torn apart suddenly erupted from the distance. This sound was extremely sharp and piercing, and it was accompanied by the blood-curdling cries of countless mighty figures. Not only did this attract her attention, but Even and Lin also turned toward that direction. Both of their expressions shifted drastically as they cursed in their hearts. This was a heavenly god with a body that was split into 2 halves, one of which had 2 pupils. This heavenly god held an extremely peculiar black and white double-edged sword in one hand and a human head in the other. This was heavenly Yin Yang god, and it was holding immortal monarch Wang Chen's head in its hand. Lin's body almost exploded upon seeing this, and his mind shuddered violently. He had thought that heavenly yin-yang god would charge toward him with all its might and wouldn't attack the passers-by. That was indeed what heavenly yin-yang god had done in the beginning. However, who would have thought that heavenly yin-yang god would suddenly turn around and attack the 100 Immortal formation when it was passing by? Heavenly yin-yang god was a ruthless man, and he immediately unleashed his most powerful attack, the yin-yang heavenly blade, which caught the immortals of the Divine Essence Pavilion completely off guard and tore a hole into the 100 Immortal formation. Then, he charged into the hole and instantly killed several Return to Void stage mighty figures before crippling immortal monarch Wang Chen. Everything had happened far too quickly. On this epic battlefield, many people didn't even have time to pay attention to what was happening at the 100 Immortal formation until heart-wrenching cries of anguish erupted, and Lin shifted his gaze away from Su Xiaolan. Su Xiaolan gritted her teeth as she turned toward heavenly yin-yang god. She had initially planned to hold off 4 heavenly gods on her own, but she had wasted too much time with heavenly goddess Wu Yin, which gave heavenly yin-yang god an opportunity to take advantage of. A hint of guilt and shame welled up in her heart. Lin. Heavenly yin-yang god cocked his head to the side as he held onto Wang Chen's head with a smile on his face. Sect leader Lin, save me, save me. Wang Chen's entire body was drenched in blood, and he no longer looked like a peerless sword immortal. He looked up at Lin with great difficulty, and he was already treating that white robe as his final hope. Rumble! A terrifying aura erupted from the top of Yutong's city wall. Lin's face darkened as he yelled, "Heavenly yin-yang god, let him go! Let him go!" The heavenly yin-yang god grinned and moved his fingers. Bam! The subordinate's head suddenly exploded. A cloud of blood mist appeared in the void, and the headless body fell to the ground, making a monotonous sound. The voices on the battlefield suddenly quieted down. Countless people were so shocked that they couldn't make a sound. The great Tao of heaven and earth let out a mournful cry at this moment. Heaven and earth mourned the fall of a Tao integration stage super mighty figure. The immortals of the Divine Source continent were completely dumbfounded. No, immortal King Wang Chen! How could this be? Some of the immortals looked dazed, while others even burst into tears. Immortal monarch Wang Chen was someone who was revered by countless exalted immortals on the Divine Source continent. Now that he had died before their very eyes, it was simply too much of a shock to them. The culprit was the heavenly yin-yang god. His hands were still stained with blood, but the corners of his mouth curled up to an exaggerated degree. Who do you think you are? Do you think you have the right to order me around? Everyone. In that instant it was as if heaven and earth had congealed. The sky had already darkened. The eyes of the heavenly yin-yang god turned to the man on the top of Yutong City's city wall, and they became golden, as if they were the only source of light in the darkness. The hundreds of millions of living beings were unable to feel any warmth from those eyes. Instead, they were filled with boundless frost. The heavenly yin-yang god shuddered involuntarily in shock. What kind of power was this? Lin looked at the heavenly yin-yang god in silence as an indescribably terrifying aura erupted into the sky. Even the heavens were wailing, as if they were struggling to withstand this man's terrifying aura. Cold sweat began to appear on the heavenly yin-yang god's forehead, but the smile on his face remained. At this moment, a golden ring had already appeared behind Lin. The powers of metal, wood, water, fire, and earth, which he had already refined to the maximum level, converged in a special trajectory at the center of the ring to form a new power of the 5 elements. It was as if a primordial beast had bared its menacing fangs and was ready to tear its enemies apart. Lin's aura was extremely terrifying, and not only did it strike fear into the hearts of his enemies, it also struck fear into the hearts of his allies. His body suddenly tore through space and pounced toward the heavenly yin-yang god at an unimaginable speed. The heavenly yin-yang god immediately turned tail and fled. If he continued to fight Enlin now, he would definitely be killed. Yin-yang blink lightning escape. A pair of yin and yang fish appeared beneath the heavenly yin-yang god's feet, and his body transformed into two streaks of light that intertwined with one another as he fled into the distance at an extremely fast speed. There was an extremely important reason why he was so confident in provoking Enlin. That was because he was the fastest among the 10 heavenly gods. However, the sound of wind and lightning exploding erupted from behind him. The heavenly yin-yang god looked behind him, and his heart jolted with fear. He discovered that the distance between him and Enlin was closing. Was Enlin really that fast? The heavenly yin-yang god gritted his teeth, and the black and white divine halo above his head glowed with a scintillating light as he unleashed the power of a heavenly god to his maximum speed. This type of power was extremely harmful to his body, but he had no other choice. If he didn't run away as quickly as possible and allowed Enlin to catch up to him, then it wouldn't be a matter of whether he would be injured or not. On the battlefield, all of the living beings could only see two figures flying through the air, but they couldn't even see the trajectories of their movements. All they knew was that they were getting further and further away from the central battlefield. The heavenly yin-yang god is dead for sure. That's for sure. God En is already an absolute tyrant against normal heavenly gods. The heavenly yin-yang god is quite good at escaping, but he's dead for sure if Enlin catches up to him. Sect leader Enlin, you have to avenge Wang Chen. The grief of heaven and earth phenomenon was still taking place, but both the Heavenly Human Tribe United Army and the Allied forces knew that this was definitely not the last Dao integration stage super mighty figure to perish. The true battle had only just begun. Enlin. Su Xiaolan took a deep breath as she looked on at Enlin's departing figure. Her body flashed again as she charged toward the heavenly transformation goddess, who was trying to follow Enlin. She couldn't help Enlin defend against all of his enemies, but she definitely wasn't going to let these 3 heavenly gods go. The battle was still raging. Even though all of the most powerful heavenly gods had been kept at bay, the overall power of the Heavenly Human Tribe United Army was still significantly more powerful than that of the Allied forces. The battle was still slowly advancing toward Yutong City. Destructive energy reverberated through heaven and earth as blood seeped into the earth. No one was able to detect that some of the stray energy was being absorbed by the formation. The blood was also fusing into the formation. The 9-colored pillar of light within the heaven-punishing formation had already begun to split apart. Chapter 2049. Charge! Kill all of the humans. Kill all of our enemies. The Heavenly Human Tribe United Army charged toward Yutong City. Only around 210 million remained of the Heavenly Human Tribe United Army, while the Heaven-Crushing United Army had been reduced to just over 80 million. The Heavenly Human Tribe United Army had suffered twice as many casualties as the Heaven-Crushing United Army, but this was definitely going to change as they closed in on the Heaven-Crushing United Army. The Heavenly Human Tribe United Army continued onward with no fear of death. Streaks of white light flashed through the sky and tore through the earth before crashing into the Heaven-Crushing United Army like missiles, sending flesh and blood flying through the air. Their attacks were very simple, but they were extremely powerful. The Heaven-Crushing United Army was showing signs of crumbling in the face of the increasingly concentrated attacks. The Heaven-Crushing United Army was still inferior to the Heavenly Human Tribe United Army. After all, the Heavenly Human Tribe had far too many Heaven Pioneer Stage Great Generals. There were over 50 of them, 12 Dao Integration Stage Super Mighty Figures, 200 Return to Void Stage, and over 1,000 Soul-Piercing Stage Super Mighty Figures. No matter where they appeared, they would be able to make any top-rate power piss their pants. The Heaven-Crushing United Army knew that they would be in dire straits once they closed in on the Heaven-Crushing United Army. They were under immense pressure, and they could only unleash spell techniques through the heaven-punishing formation. Archangel Uriel had thought that this was going to be a battle of life and death with the Wind Walker. However, there were far too many top-rate enemies, and the Wind Walker had 2 Heaven Pioneer stage great generals as allies. How were they supposed to fight this? All of the other Tao integration stage super mighty figures were also in dire strait. The 9 Tao integration stage super mighty figures in charge of the heaven-punishing formation looked at one another, upon which they could all see the determination in each other's eyes. It's time to use that technique. The glazed Buddha spoke in a benevolent voice. Heaven and Earth Annihilation First Song Immortal Slaying. The Holy Martial Clan Tao Integration Stage Super Mighty Figure, Spirit Origin Martial Lord, gripped his blue divine sword with both hands before stabbing it into the sky. Rumble, wind and clouds suddenly surged within the heaven-punishing formation as sword intent permeated the entire sky. At the very top of the 9-colored light pillar in the center of the formation, countless rays of light suddenly scattered in all directions. Then, they condensed with the sword chi in the sky, forming extremely powerful 9-colored heavenly swords. Countless 9-colored heavenly swords hung in the sky, and just the sword might they released was enough to strike fear into the hearts of countless living beings on the battlefield. So many heavenly swords, there must be at least 10 million of them, right? This is the power of the great formation of heavenly punishment? But where did this world-shaking power come from? Many members of the heaven-crushing coalition army were flabbergasted. They were part of the great heaven-punishing formation, but they knew very well that not much of their power had been drained away. Instead, their power had increased. In front of the Spirit Origin Martial Lord, a Tao Integration Stage Divine Dragon and 2 Heaven Pioneer Stage Great Generals were attacking him in a frenzy in an attempt to disrupt his spellcasting. However, at this moment, the formation had already released a mighty force of the Way of the Sword, which became his barrier and blocked all the attacks that were aimed at him. Spirit Origin Martial Lord gripped his sword with both hands as the soaring sword chi gradually solidified. He slashed forward, and the majestic sword chi slashed down, severing one of the wings of the Western Celestial Dragon. The remaining sword chi also sent the martials on both sides flying. Go, immortal slaying sword! As if a heavenly decree had been issued, the tens of millions of heavenly swords descended upon the heavenly human tribe united army with even more ferocity than a torrential downpour. Each and every 9-colored heavenly sword seemed to have a life of its own. They were able to pierce into the bodies of their enemies with extreme precision before exploding into sword chi. Countless heavenly human tribe powerful beings instantly fell amid blood-curdling cries. White blood splattered all over the ground before being absorbed by the formation. Aside from the soul-piercing stage heavenly human tribe powerful beings, almost none of the heavenly human tribe powerful beings had the ability to evade these 9-colored heavenly swords, and almost all of them were insta-killed. Blood-curdling cries erupted. In less than 15 minutes, the immortal slaying sword formation had unleashed its full power, and over 9 million enemies had been slain. This was a monstrous feat, and it had crushed the morale of the heavenly human tribe united army significantly, turning the entire battlefield into a purgatory of blood and gore. Our heaven-punishing formation is this powerful? Let's do it again. Slay these heavenly human tribe bastards one more time. The heaven-crushing coalition army roared in unison, and their morale was at an all-time high. After witnessing the might of the heaven-punishing formation, they were feeling a little more confident. The heavenly human tribe united army was already around 200 million powerful beings, but they were still more than twice as many as the heaven-crushing coalition army. The pressure on the heaven-crushing coalition army was actually quite heavy, but this didn't dampen their fervor in the slightest. Instead, they became even more ferocious. This was something that the 9 Tao integration stage super mighty figures in charge of the heaven-punishing formation were very happy to see. As long as they were in the heaven-punishing formation, they would fight to the death without any regrets. The Heavenly Human Tribe United Army continued to close the distance between them, and they were now less than 50 kilometers away from Yutong City. Thus, they began to engage in melee combat with the heaven-crushing coalition army. The battle was becoming extremely brutal. Spell techniques clashed, and blood and flesh flew through the air. At this point in the battle, the number of Soul Formation stage powerful beings and Return to Void stage mighty figures was starting to increase. The Return to Void stage mighty figures, who were dominating the battlefield just a second ago, could very well be slain by a few Heaven Pioneer stage great generals in the next second. The heaven-crushing coalition army originally had an advantage in long-range attacks due to the formation, but the number of casualties they suffered was now almost 1-to-1. Demon Lord Luanyu, it's your turn. Spirit Origin Martial Lord suddenly spoke. A true demon tribe super mighty figure with crimson flames revolving around his body and divine pattern chains around his arms let loose an enraged roar. He stomped a foot down onto the ground, and the earth tremored and cracked open as a series of crimson flames rose up from the ground before proliferating outward. Heaven punishing Earth Second Symphony, Earth refining sea of flames. The ground that the Heavenly Human Tribe United Army was passing through suddenly became scorching hot. Immediately afterward, even the rocks around them began to melt, transforming into molten lava that could melt anything. Countless Heavenly Human Tribe powerful beings who were running on the ground were instantly scorched to death by the scorching earth. Those who reacted in time immediately spread open their wings and flew into the sky. However, the Blood Tribe living beings who didn't have wings and the Creation Realm living beings were in a much more miserable state. All of them were incinerated and melted by the scorching temperatures, and they didn't even have a chance to escape. The entire ground had been transformed into a purgatory that could melt anything. Where could they run to? The Heavenly Human Tribe powerful beings didn't even have a chance to heave a sigh of relief before they discovered that a series of rifts had appeared in the scorching earth, from which red flames of even higher temperatures erupted forth. These flames were like the claws of demons, and many Heavenly Human Tribe powerful beings were unable to evade in time before they were engulfed by the flames. That's right, within the earth refining sea of flames, both the ground and the sky were transformed into hell. Chapter 2050. The Heavenly Human Tribe powerful beings at the forefront of the battle suddenly felt a scorching sensation on their back. They turned around to discover that they had already been reduced to a flaming hell. This flaming hell had completely sliced the Heavenly Human Tribe United Army in half. They had initially been able to continue onward as they had the support of their enemies. But now there was hell behind them. They had gone from bullying the minority with numbers to being trapped beasts, and the situation was different now. Sure enough, the heaven-crushing stage great generals took this rare opportunity to slaughter all of the Heavenly Human Tribe United Army's vanguard. The Heaven Pioneer stage great generals unleashed their power of the heavens to suppress the flames on the ground in order to provide a path for the army to advance. However, this also happened to weaken the enemy's most powerful beings. In any case, the heaven-crushing stage United Army was the one benefiting from this. The destructive power of the first punishing heaven and earth tune, Sea of Flames, was slightly lower than that of the immortal slaying sword formation, with only 7 million casualties. However, this was only a relative figure. For the Heavenly Human Tribe United Army, this was an extremely terrifying number of casualties. Come with me to slay Demon Lord Luanyu, and the Glazed Buddha and Archangel Gabriel. All of the Heavenly Human Tribe United Army's Tao Integration Stage super mighty figures and Heaven Pioneer Stage powerful beings swarmed toward the 9 Tao Integration Stage super mighty figures of the Heavenly Human Tribe United Army. As long as they could kill them, the Heavenly Human Tribe United Army's threat would plummet. The power displayed by the Heavenly Human Tribe United Army was simply too terrifying. The Heavenly Human Tribe United Army was willing to pay any price to break this spell formation. As long as the spell formation was broken, the heaven-crushing stage united army would definitely be unable to hold off the heavenly human tribe united army. Roar! Kill them! The Tao integration stage divine dragon, the white yiksha, flapped its wings and transformed into sharp crescent wind blades as it charged toward the glazed Buddha. Wherever it passed, all the living beings of the heaven-crushing united army would be sliced in half. Kill the glazed Buddha. The 5 heavenly human tribe great generals also pounced toward the glazed Buddha. However, right at this moment, a series of extremely powerful immortal spells suddenly crashed down upon them. Heaven-crushing flying feather slash. Heaven-crushing tiger roar. Nightmare falling thousand flashing shadows. Over 90 return to void stage immortals and 2 Tao integration stage super mighty figures formed 100 immortal formation and unleashed a barrage of spell techniques to harass the Tao integration stage divine dragons and the heavenly human tribe great generals. They were the experts of the divine origin pavilion. After being enhanced by the 100 immortal formation, their heaven-crushing techniques could unleash attacks at the Tao integration pinnacle stage. On the battlefield, aside from being bullied by heavenly gods, they had nothing to fear. After being buffed by the 100 immortal grand array, the power of the immortals' spells was greatly increased. White Yiksha could not dodge in time and was bombarded by dozens of spells. He cried out in pain and fell to the ground. The Heaven Pioneer stage great generals didn't dare to face the immortals head-on and were forced into retreat. One of the great generals was even killed by Yen Ji and the River God. At this time, the true usefulness of the divine origin pavilion was revealed. It was an invincible king below the heavenly deity realm, a super stable team of the 100 immortals. Whether it was a one-on-one fight or a group fight, they were invincible. They also volunteered to protect the 9 Tao integration stage super mighty figures of the heaven punishing formation. All of the other Tao integration stage super mighty figures who weren't within the heavenly human tribe united army were also protecting the 9 Tao integration stage super mighty figures with their lives on the line. The heavenly human tribe united army was unable to inflict any lethal damage on the 9 Tao integration stage super mighty figures, and the situation was plunged into a stalemate. At this moment, the several dozen Heaven Pioneer stage great generals exchanged meaningful glances. One of the great generals with an extraordinary disposition walked into the sky and spread open his arms with a pious expression. A holy light suddenly descended from the sky and illuminated his entire body. O venerable and eternal heavens, I am Chen Er. Please allow me to unleash the ultimate heavenly punishment to cleanse all of the enemies of the heavens. He spoke in a humble and pious voice. A golden speck of light fell from the sky and landed between Great General Chen Er's brows. A golden heavenly pattern diagram began to appear on Great General Chen Er's forehead, and it actually began to expand at an insane rate. At the same time, the other Heaven Pioneer stage great generals also seemed to have sensed something, and they all began to chant a special language. At the same time, bursts of energy began to radiate from their bodies before surging into the sky. Chen Er looked down at the heaven-crushing tribe united army with an expression of absolute confidence and indifference. Don't think that you're the only one with trump cards. Our heavenly human tribe united army also has trump cards. He pointed a finger into the sky. At the same time, the other Heaven Pioneer stage great generals also pointed a finger into the sky. At this moment, white energy began to surge through the sky like flowing clouds. It was holy and pure, but it made all the powerful beings of the heaven-crushing tribe united army feel an extreme sense of danger. Our trump card is called the ultimate heavenly punishment. O venerable heavens, cleanse all of the enemies before us. Rumble! The heavens roared. The wrath of the heavens had finally been unleashed. It was boundless, and it was as if it were imbued with absolute power. The white clouds became heavier and heavier, and in that instant, It was as if the entire sky were about to crash down upon them. The glazed Buddha seemed to have detected something, and its expression shifted drastically. Its Buddhist voice instantly spread throughout the entire battlefield. No one could understand what it was saying, but everyone understood what it was trying to say. Don't run, use all your power to defend. Right at this moment, a white light began to descend from the sky. It was like sunlight, instantly illuminating the entire battlefield and shining upon all living beings. A spirit-nurturing stage true demon tribe mighty figure didn't even have a chance to unleash a defensive spell technique before his entire body was enveloped by the white light. His body then shuddered and his eyes became glazed over. This light is so warm. Is this what I've been searching for? He looked up at the white light in the sky, and he extended a hand to touch it. So that's how it is. I was the one in the wrong. Please, please forgive me. The true demon tribe powerful being suddenly knelt to the ground with tears of remorse streaming down his face. Then, his body began to transform into particles of light and disappear. The true demon tribe powerful being seemed to have received salvation, and a smile appeared on his face as he disappeared from this world without any resistance. The same thing happened to countless living beings of the heaven-crushing United Army. Regardless of whether they were from the true demon tribe, the Holy Martial Clan, or the Buddhist kingdom, they were all unable to resist this light. Tears streamed down their faces, or expressions of infatuation appeared on their faces as they transformed into particles of light and disappeared. The ultimate heavenly punishment encompassed the entire battlefield within a radius of several thousand kilometers. Furthermore, it was a screen of light that illuminated even the tiniest speck of dust. This was a top-notch area of effect attack, and in the blink of an eye, over 10 million living beings of the heaven-crushing United Army were struck. Only powerful beings who had unleashed defensive spell techniques were able to significantly reduce their chances of being struck. However, they weren't completely safe either. There were already soul formation stage powerful beings who had transformed into particles of light and disappeared. There were no energy fluctuations emanating from this spell technique, and it didn't appear to be harmful. Instead, it was extremely holy and pure, as if it were a holy light that could purify one's soul. However, it was exactly because of this that the heaven-crushing United Army didn't even know how to evade or defend against it. All they could do was endure it in silence. The white light in the sky showed no signs of dissipating. Instead, it became more and more intense, and the heaven-crushing United Army's casualties continued to mount at a rapid rate. The heaven-crushing United Army was extremely astonished. If the ultimate heavenly punishment continued to take effect, no matter how many of them there were, they wouldn't be able to kill these heavenly humans. Chapter 2051. The ultimate heavenly punishment was far too bizarre and inexplicable. Wherever the white light of the heavens shone upon, all living beings transformed into particles of light and disappeared. This was a top-notch Yoi attack, and it was extremely terrifying to the heaven-crushing United Army. No, we have to interrupt this spell technique. Dipankara Buddha roared with rage as he pointed a finger toward the core of this spell technique. Great General Chen Air. Return to Dipankara, karmic reversal. A burning, dark yellow light appeared behind Marshal Chen Air out of nowhere. It flickered with a dim, quiet light. In that instant it was as if heaven and earth had fallen silent, and only the sizzling sound of the lamp could be heard. Dipankara Buddha was the Buddha of the past, and his cultivation had reached the point where he could interfere with the past and change the present. What he wanted to do was interfere with the past that great General Chen Air had unleashed, thereby completely erasing the ultimate heavenly punishment from the face of this world. Without the past, there was no way to form a connection with the ultimate heavenly punishment, so the ultimate heavenly punishment would immediately disappear. Great General Chen Air's body shuddered, and he felt as if something within his body was quickly disappearing. The light of the ultimate heavenly punishment in the sky also began to dim. What a powerful time Dao technique. Chen Er's expression shifted slightly as he put his palms together, and the heavenly pattern on his forehead began to glow brightly. A peculiar white light erupted from his body like the sun. The heavenly Tao is eternal, all laws shall not perish. Chen Er let loose an explosive roar as veins bulged all over his body, and blood trickled down the corners of his lips. His body had clearly suffered a backlash, but he still persevered with a calm and sincere expression. Several dozen heaven pioneers, stage great generals, all sent a wisp of pure heavenly power into Chen Er's body through the sky, making the heavenly pattern on his forehead even more dazzling. The dark yellow lamp behind him began to be suppressed by the white light before being torn apart. The burning ancient Buddha threw up a mouthful of blood, and he hurtled back in retreat as if he had been severely wounded. Chen Er looked at Dipankara Buddha with a cold expression. You're just a Tao integration stage Buddha, and you want to change the will of the heavens? Aha! A piercing wail sounded. Heavenly God Myriad Transformations was knocked flying by an extremely terrifying vermilion bird, and even the space in his wake was set ablaze. Countless heavenly human tribe powerful beings were incinerated into ashes by the residual flames. Heavenly God Myriad Transformations, you! Marshal Chen Er was stunned for a moment. He realized that there was a woman in green inside the vermilion bird. She was charging towards him with the Myriad Transformations Heavenly God in her hands. F***CK. Chen Er's heart skipped a beat, and he immediately thought of escaping. However, the vermilion bird was simply too fast. Chen Er had only just spread open his snowy white wings when the vermilion bird crashed into his body. It was impossible to describe what kind of power this was. Just the power of the heavenly God Myriad Transformations attack alone was enough to shatter all spell techniques and shatter his organs. The clear cry of a vermilion bird suddenly rang out. The vermilion bird materialized from the vermilion bird's essential power, and its sharp beak pierced through heavenly God Myriad Transformations' chest with extreme heat. Then, it continued to puncture Great General Chen Er, who was standing behind Heavenly God Myriad Transformations, and the two of them were strung together. PFFF. Marshal Chen Er spat out a mouthful of blood. His entire body felt like it was on fire and his consciousness started to blur. This was the feeling of death. Why did this happen? Marshal Chen Er was still completely dumbstruck as he looked at the exquisitely beautiful woman bathed in holy vermilion flames. Why did this person suddenly appear? Why was she trying to kill him without even saying anything? The vermilion bird withdrew its beak, and a gargantuan, bloody hole appeared on both Heavenly God Myriad Transformations and Marshal Chen Er's chests. The blood within had already been incinerated by the scorching flames. The vermilion bird's beak transformed into a golden and blue double-edged divine sword. This was none other than Su Xiaolan's dragon sparrow sword. Su Xiaolan waved her sword as she looked at the two people before her. Heavenly God Myriad Transformations, I told you not to stand in my way. Do you really have to force me to kill you as well? Heavenly God Myriad Transformations' mouth gaped open. All of the beautiful human faces on her body had a sword wound on it, and the flames from the bloody hole in her chest were ravaging her body in a frenzy. She was in an extremely wretched state, and she didn't even have the energy to speak. Heavenly God Chen Er didn't know what to say upon seeing this. It looked like the heavenly gods had already done everything they could. He had been looking down on everyone as if he were the ruler of the entire battlefield, but now, he had been slain by a single sword strike from Su Xiaolan. How ironic, Divine Phoenix Maiden, stop right now. Your opponents are us. Heavenly God Solitary Star and Heavenly God Silent Sound charged toward her from either side. Back then, you guys split up to attack me, and I had to run all over the place. Now, you're all willing to charge at me together? A faint smile appeared on Su Xiaolan's face. Unfortunately, it's too late. She turned toward Heavenly God Chen Er with a smile. You've gone too far. Die. The dragon sparrow sword shuddered lightly. The flames on Marshal Chen Eyre's chest exploded violently. An extremely blood-curdling wail erupted as Marshal Chen Eyre's body was completely engulfed by the flames, reducing him to ashes. Rumble! The heavens wailed with grief. The white light in the sky finally disappeared. All of the living beings under the illumination of the light gradually regained their clarity. All of the living beings who had tears streaming down their faces, all of the living beings who were pounding their chests in agony, and all of the living beings with expressions of yearning on their faces gradually congealed. In the next instant they all came to their senses, and there was only one thought in their minds. What the F***ck have I done? It's over. The heavenly tribulation has been dispelled. What? I thought I was going to die for sure. All hail the divine Phoenix Maiden. The heaven-crushing united army was cheering, and all of the powerful beings and mighty figures heaved a collective sigh of relief. After Enlin's departure, Su Xiaolan had become the most dazzling being on the battlefield. She was able to take on 3 heavenly gods on her own, but she still had the energy to spare to slay Marshal Chen Eyre, who was in the midst of unleashing a spell technique. Her peerless combat prowess gave them a very strong sense of security. However, even though the spell technique had been dispelled, the heaven-crushing united army situation did not improve much. The heavenly human tribe's trump card was still very effective. The ultimate heavenly tribulation had reduced over 10 million living beings of the heaven-crushing united army into specks of light. Now, the heaven-crushing united army had been reduced to just over 70 million, while the heavenly human tribe united army had over 190 million. As time passed, the situation only became more dire. Gabriel, are you ready? The glazed Buddha asked in an urgent voice. Just a little bit more. Gabriel pursed her lips as she looked around at all of the living beings on the battlefield, and she shook her head lightly. Then I'll go first. An ethereal voice that was as gentle as water sounded. All of the Tao integration stage super mighty figures' expressions shifted upon hearing this. Sect leader Wutian, are you going to attack at a time like this? We haven't reached the most critical juncture yet. Are you sure you don't want to wait? All of the Tao integration stage super mighty figures instinctively used honorific. A white-robed true Buddha with black horns on her head and features that were as beautiful as a woman's walked toward the heaven-crushing united army. The moment of thought is the cause. Now is the right time. His voice was very pleasant to the ears, and he made a Buddhist seal with his hands as he spoke in a calm voice. Heaven and Earth Annihilation Third Song, Salvation. Chapter 2052. A massive swastika symbol appeared on the ground of the heaven-punishing formation. It encompassed an area of over 500 kilometers and revolved in a clockwise direction. Vast Buddhist light enshrouded the entire battlefield, exuding the aura of the perfected Great Compassion stage. At the same time, rainbow clouds drifted down from the sky. Above the clouds, there were over 10,000 golden holy Buddhas looking down at the world below. Boundless rainbow light appeared, and bursts of pleasant Buddhist chants flowed into the ears of all living beings. All of the heavenly human tribe united army living beings felt an indescribable sense of benevolence welling up in their hearts, as if participating in this battle was an extremely immoral and unjust thing to do. Guilt, shame, remorse, self-blame. All of these emotions transformed into an extremely resolute conviction. Bam 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 bam, regardless of whether it was the heavenly human tribe or the blood tribe, all of them suddenly put down their weapons as expressions of enlightenment appeared on their faces. Lay down your weapons and become Buddhas. This was the only thought in the hearts of the heavenly human tribe united army. However, the heaven-crushing united army became even more ferocious after hearing the Buddhist chant. Their bodies were filled with power, and they instantly killed a large number of enemies. The Buddha is merciful, but it also has a fierce Buddha. If killing one person could save tens of millions of others, then why not fight to the bitter end? This was enlightenment, the sublimation of one's thoughts. The revelation of the Buddha's voice caused the outcome of both armies to be completely different. This was one of the reasons why Immeasurable Salvation was able to become the third song of punishing heaven and destroying earth. Soon, large batches of Heavenly Human Tribe United Army soldiers fell. One side laid down their weapons, while the other side became more and more ferocious. The speed at which their enemies were being destroyed was unimaginable. In just a few seconds, over 10 million Heavenly Human Tribe United Army soldiers had been annihilated without any resistance. At this moment, a heavenly goddess with a frail and delicate body flew into the clouds as her bare, jade-like feet stepped onto the strings of the Buddhist chants. What a powerful sound technique attack! But it has its flaws as well. Heavenly Goddess Silent Sound's eyes were still tightly shut, and her other hand made a very special divine seal before abruptly plucking the strings. At the same time, the pulsating divine halo above her head began to emit a crisp, earth-shattering sound. Shatter! Ding! The crisp sound tore through the chanting of tens of thousands of golden Buddhas, and even the clouds in the distance were shattered by the paramount power of laws. You dare to split your attention to deal with the power of the great heavenly punishment formation while fighting me? Su Xiaolan suddenly appeared behind Heavenly Goddess Wu Yin, and her dragon sparrow sword fell with a roar. This sword strike was far too fast, and it instantly tore through Heavenly Goddess Wu Yin's robe and snowy white skin. The extreme sharpness imbued within the sword even sliced Heavenly Goddess Wu Yin's body in half. Empyrean God Silent! Heavenly God! Countless experts of the Heavenly Human Tribe cried out in grief and indignation. He, sacrificing yourself for the greater good? How touching! Su Xiaolan sneered. At this moment, Heavenly Goddess Silent Sound's body, which had been sliced in half, slowly became incorporeal. It became a beautiful melody reverberating through the sky, as if it had become a voice. Then, the voice slowly became incorporeal, as if it had become a human again. She looked like she had been revived, but in reality, 2 glaring cracks had appeared on the divine halo above her head. All of the Heavenly Human Tribe living beings knew that Heavenly Goddess Silent Sound's essence had been severely wounded. However, Heavenly Goddess Silent Sound was not in the worst state. 3 cracks had already appeared on the divine halo above Heavenly God Solitary Star's head. Heavenly God Myriad Transformation's divine halo was like a shattered piece of glass. Her smooth and flawless divine halo now looked like a spider's web, and it looked as if it would shatter into shards of glass from the slightest touch. Heavenly God Myriad Transformation was in extreme despair. She didn't know why, but Su Xiaolan seemed to have some kind of vendetta against her. If the 3 heavenly gods attacked Su Xiaolan at once, then Su Xiaolan would definitely beat her to death. If things continued like this, she would definitely be the first heavenly god to fall. Silent. Heavenly God Solitary Star and Heavenly God Myriad Transformations immediately charged toward Su Xiaolan upon seeing that Heavenly Goddess Wu Yin was in trouble. A disdainful expression appeared on Su Xiaolan's face when she saw Heavenly Goddess Silent Sound. She didn't say anything as she raised her sword and slashed it toward Heavenly God Myriad Transformation. Heavenly God Myriad Transformation was on the verge of tears upon seeing this. All of the beautiful faces on her body were on the verge of tears. She was going to beat her up again. Why was she doing this? However, the reason why Su Xiaolan was targeting her was actually very simple. She didn't like her appearance. She was a beautiful woman, so why did she have to put so many beautiful faces on her skin? Who was she trying to disgust? She had to burn something like this. If Heavenly God Myriad Transformation knew that this was the reason why she was being targeted like this, who knew what she would think? The 3 heavenly gods continued to battle Su Xiaolan. Everyone knew that if things continued like this, there was a good chance that all 3 heavenly gods would be killed by Su Xiaolan. Su Xiaolan's terrifying combat prowess had once again shattered everyone's understanding of her. The battle was still ongoing. The clouds in the sky had already been shattered by heavenly goddess' silent sound. However, the heavenly human tribe united army discovered that the golden swastika symbol on the ground was still revolving. A sense of foreboding welled up in the hearts of all the powerful beings of the heavenly human tribe united army. Their instincts were correct. The swastika symbol had absorbed the energy on the battlefield and suddenly transformed into a series of divine weapons imbued with Buddhist power. Each of the divine weapons was glowing with a dazzling golden light, and countless Buddhist mantras were engraved on their surfaces, all of which were imbued with the most fundamental and transcendent Buddhist true intent. Now, the true intent of the third heaven-destroying earth symphony, the boundless salvation, is to pave the way for the fourth heaven-destroying earth symphony. The heavenless sect leader put his palms together as a pure and beautiful smile appeared on his face. Fourth heaven-destroying earth symphony, dusk of the gods. Whoosh whoosh whoosh, the divine weapons began to rise into the sky, and their surfaces emanated a surging Buddhist light, as if they had brought dusk to this world. This, another new technique from the heaven-destroying formation? Is there no end to it? Some of the heavenly human tribe united army living beings' hearts jolted, and even their voices began to tremble. Don't panic, everyone. There aren't many of these divine weapons, only 10,000 of them. Even though they pose a powerful threat to us, there's a limit to how powerful they are. That's right. We still have 180 million soldiers. Even if we trade 1 for 1 or even 10 for 1, we won't be at a disadvantage. Let's keep going. Charge! Some of the great generals yelled to boost morale. The heavenly human tribe united army roared as they continued to battle the heaven-crushing formation. There were simply too many of them. There were a total of 180 million divine weapons. 10,000 divine weapons was a far cry from the immortal slaying sword formation's 10 million celestial swords. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. The divine weapons suddenly flew through the air, leaving a series of dazzling golden arcs in the air. General Lin Hai, look out! There are divine weapons flying toward you. A heavenly human tribe soldier cautioned. How dare you shoot at me? Lin Hai held the holy light broadsword in his hand and glanced coldly at the divine weapon that was flying towards him. He had slashed more than 10 celestial slaying heavenly swords, so he was extremely confident in dealing with the Buddhist divine weapon in front of him. He immediately raised his broadsword and took the initiative to face it. You're very fast. Let me see how powerful you are. PFFF. Lin Hai didn't even get a chance to finish his sentence before the divine weapon sliced through his holy light saber before slicing his body in half. General Lin Hai. All of the heavenly human tribe soldiers were dumbstruck. Lin Hai was a soul-piercing stage powerful being who could reach the return to void stage after unleashing his full power. He was an extremely powerful being on the battlefield, but he had just been insta-killed by a divine weapon? One had to realize there were a total of 10,000 of these divine weapons. A chill ran down the heavenly human tribe soldiers' spines. At this moment, the blood-curdling cries of powerful beings confirmed their suspicions. These divine weapons were specifically used to deal with the powerful beings of the heavenly human tribe united army, and they were only responsible for killing soul-piercing stage generals and heaven pioneer stage great generals. It was exactly because of this that it was called Twilight of the Gods. Chapter 2053. One heavenly human tribe general's anguished wails reverberated throughout the battlefield. There weren't many divine weapons, only 10,000 of them. However, all of them were materialized from gargantuan golden swastikas, and they were imbued with the power to slice through mountains, seas, and space itself. The immortal slaying celestial sword was no match for them. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. The golden divine weapons reaped the lives of the heavenly human tribe powerful beings in a frenzy. A dozen or so soul-piercing stage generals could slay one at most, and a few hundred divine weapons were enough to slay a heaven pioneer stage great general. Dusk mingled with the blood of the powerful beings. It was as if one legend after another had come to an end. The heavenless sect leader recited a Buddhist scripture, as if he was delivering the afterlife to the powerful beings who had perished. However, the carefree smile on his face made it hard for anyone to believe that he was delivering the afterlife to the dead. The great general who had once dominated the battlefield was now plunged into the ground with golden divine weapons all over his body. His vitality had been destroyed by a paramount Buddhist power, and his eyes were still filled with shock and confusion. Up until the moment of his death, he still could not believe that he had actually been killed by a bunch of messy divine weapons that had been triggered by the formation. However, he wasn't the most tragic of all. A Tao integration initial stage Red Sun spirit demon from the Void spirit realm was being hunted down by over 1,000 golden divine weapons. These divine weapons seemed to have determined that it was the easiest target to pick on among the Tao integration stage super mighty figures, and they were determined to kill it. In the end, the Red Sun spirit demon was reduced to a hornet's nest amid the anguished cries of despair. Heaven and earth began to wail with grief upon the death of a Tao integration stage super mighty figure. However, this was not the end. The divine weapons were still hunting down the remaining powerful beings in a frenzy. A few minutes later, the fourth heaven-crushing melody, Twilight of the Gods, finally began to dissipate. 10,000 divine weapons, which had once been looked down upon by the Heavenly Human Tribe United Army, had slain a Tao integration stage super mighty figure, 10 Heaven Pioneer stage great generals, 17 Return to Void stage mighty figures, and over 200 soul-piercing stage generals. What kind of terrifying feat was this? Regardless of whether they were Tao body stage, Qi refining stage trash, or Tao integration stage or Heaven Pioneer stage powerful beings, all of them were struck by a sense of fear and dread toward the heaven-crushing formation. The heaven-crushing formation's relentless attacks had them in despair, and they were afraid that it would unleash another heaven-crushing formation, and Heaven Pioneer stage. The pressure on the heaven-crushing alliance's top-tier cultivators lessened significantly, and the tide of the battle began to turn. The morale of the Heavenly Human Tribe United Army had plummeted, but they still fought with all their might, trying to use their advantage in numbers to end this battle as quickly as possible. At that moment, a voice that was like their nightmares suddenly sounded. "My move is ready. I can start with the next move." The holy and beautiful holy angel Gabriel placed one hand on her heart and spoke in a cold and ethereal voice, the fifth song of the destroyer of heaven and earth, reincarnation. At the location of her heart, countless red particles of light suddenly sprinkled onto the great formation on the ground. The heaven punishment great formation glowed with faint red light, covering the land for thousands of miles. The Heavenly Human Tribe United Army was trembling with fear. The fifth song, there really was a fifth song. The Heavenly Human Tribe United Army clearly had the upper hand, but they were really panicking. Just at this moment, the song of the dead echoed throughout the battlefield. The red light from the heaven punishment array began to merge with the corpses on the ground. All of the living beings that should have closed their eyes suddenly opened their pitch-black eyes. "Caesar, you didn't die?" A blood tribe living being suddenly opened his eyes after seeing his comrade fall to the ground. There was still some kind of energy surging through his body, and an expression of elation appeared on his face. However, he was still a little hesitant, and he gripped his weapon tightly as he maintained a safe distance. The man by the name of Caesar stood up unsteadily and turned to his comrade with a smile. "I'm fine, how could anything happen to me?" Caesar's comrade was a lot less wary after seeing that Caesar was still able to speak and his expression hadn't changed much. He made his way over to him. "You've been severely wounded, and your intestines have spilled out. Are you sure you're all right?" "I'm fine." Caesar smiled at his comrade before making his way over to him. He suddenly opened his mouth and bit down viciously on his comrade's neck. Blood splattered through the air as his comrade's anguished cries sounded. "I'm just a little anemic. Let me replenish my blood." all of the Heavenly Human Tribe United Army living beings that should have fallen to the ground stood up. They looked extremely lively, as if they had been given a new lease of life. They then pounced toward their comrade in a frenzy. As for the heaven-crushing United Army, all of their comrade also stood up. However, they didn't attack their comrade. Instead, they continued to battle the Heavenly Human Tribe United Army with all their might. They could still fight one more time. Regardless of whether it was the Heavenly Human Tribe United Army or the Heaven-Crushing Army, everyone was dumbstruck. What kind of spell technique was this? Why were all of their comrade resurrected? That was way too terrifying. Could this be a corpse control technique from the opposite shore realm? Or perhaps it's the Holy Paradise's puppet angel technique. No, they don't look like walking corpses at all. They have a certain level of consciousness, and their movements are extremely agile. This is definitely a higher-level spell technique. The most powerful being in the Blood Tribe, Emperor Fu Tian, looked on with astonishment. Boom! A streak of black light suddenly fell from the sky and blasted a soul-piercing stage general to death. Great General Lan Yu, stop! Heavens! He actually killed General Allen. Expressions of shock and horror appeared on the faces of all of the Heavenly Human Tribe living beings as they looked on at the Heaven Pioneer stage Great General who had been killed by the divine weapon being resurrected. However, that wasn't the main point. What was going on with those pillars of black light falling from the sky? How could puppets that had been resurrected from corpses be able to unleash power of this level? Ahahaha! Eat, eat, eat! I'm going to eat all of you to death! The Red Sun Spirit Demon, who had been pierced by over 1,000 divine weapons, had also been resurrected. It then transformed into a series of afterimages before pouncing on its comrade in a frenzy. Aside from the fact that it couldn't use its power of the divine Tao, all of its other powers were no different from when it was alive. This was extremely terrifying. A Tao integration stage being was like a reaper for all living beings on the battlefield. Emperor Fu Tian's body trembled violently. The level of this spell technique had far exceeded his imagination. The heaven-punishing formation's reincarnation technique could retain a portion of the deceased's power for resurrection and manipulation, and this was a large-scale resurrection spell technique that could radiate for over 1,000 kilometers regardless of cultivation base or race. Was this a F***king joke? How could there be such an extraordinarily powerful formation in this world? On the battlefield, all of the living beings that could still be seen as corpses stood up. They had all become part of the heaven-crushing army's strength. How many living beings had been killed by the Heavenly Human Tribe United Army? 230 million became 180 million, which meant that 50 million living beings had perished. Meanwhile, the heaven-crushing United Army had been reduced from 90 million to 70 million, which meant that 20 million of them had perished. Among these dead living beings, there were 50 million corpses that were barely usable. In other words, the heaven-crushing United Army had gained an army of 50 million. These dead beings weren't just walking corpses. Instead, they were truly terrifying beings who could use spell technique. Regardless of whether it was the surging energy within their bodies or their various battle techniques, all of them were no different from when they were alive. Even after being resurrected, Heaven Pioneer stage Great Generals could use the Holy Dark Light, which was almost identical to the Holy Dark Light. The battlefield instantly became a paradise for the dead. After being slain by the Heavenly Human Tribe United Army, the bodies of the Heavenly Human Tribe United Army would crawl back up from the ground before attacking their comrade. Meanwhile, the living beings of the heaven-crushing United Army would crawl back up from the ground before attacking their enemies again. It was as if they had two lives. This was an absolute nightmare for the Heavenly Human Tribe United Army. The Heavenly Human Tribe United Army was plunged into a bitter battle. Their advantage in numbers had been completely wiped out by this terrifying army of dead beings. Chapter 2054. A series of resounding booms reverberated throughout the entire battlefield outside of Yutong City. The dead living beings just so happened to be situated where the battle was the most intense, so the undead army immediately became the vanguard of the heaven-crushing united army after being resurrected. They didn't need to run. All they had to do was swing their sabers at the enemies around them. This was extremely terrifying to the heavenly human tribe united army. What did it mean by using the undead army as the vanguard? What it meant was that the other side was already dead, but they risked their lives to trade one for one. Then, the other side's undead fell, and their ally was killed. This was not the end. The end result was that their ally would rise again and become the enemy's undead army, thereby continuing the cycle. If things continued like this, the heaven-crushing united army would be able to destroy the heavenly human tribe united army with their undead army alone. We can't continue like this. We have to break this formation. That's right. We can't afford to have such an insane formation on this battlefield. If things continue like this, we're going to be exhausted to death. We have to destroy the heaven-crushing formation at all costs. The heavenly human tribe great general and all of the Tao integration stage super mighty figures gritted their teeth. They once again pounced toward the 9 Tao integration stage super mighty figures who were maintaining the formation. They were beginning to fight with their lives on the line. The battle was becoming more and more intense. Gabriel, who was in the process of unleashing her reincarnation technique, became the target of all of the powerful beings. She stood on the battlefield with her white wings spread open. She had one hand over her heart while her other hand stroked the earth. She was so beautiful and flawless. She was supposed to be an existence that could change all living beings in this world, but she was responsible for summoning countless dead souls and the power of death. Do you hear that? The will of God? Gabriel's long eyelashes trembled as she looked up into the sky. Do you feel that? The power of God? More and more red particles of light emanated from her heart, and her body gradually became more and more illusionary, as if she were a holy maiden who had sacrificed herself to the world. Gabriel was the holy angel of reincarnation and the only being in the entire holy paradise who could receive the power of God. Even though her combat prowess was inferior to Michael's, her cultivation base was already at the pinnacle of the Tao integration stage, and she was even close to the God of creation stage. In the face of the combined attacks of several Tao integration stage super mighty figures and a dozen or so heaven pioneer stage great generals, there was no hint of panic on her face. Instead, she looked up calmly into the sky with her eyes closed, as if she were listening to something. The great formation of heaven's punishment unleashed a black and red energy cyclone that engulfed Gabriel's slender body, engulfing all the incoming spells. Several Tao integration stage super mighty figures and a dozen or so heaven pioneer stage great generals were completely unable to break through the energy vortex. They unleashed all of their combination techniques, but they were still unable to do anything. Damn it! The power unleashed by this formation has already transcended the Tao integration stage. We need to rely on Lord Kami's power to break it open. Which heavenly God is free? All of the powerful beings of the heavenly human tribe united army turned their pleading eyes toward the powerful beings on the battlefield. Heavenly Goddess Solitary Star, Heavenly Goddess Wu Yin, and Heavenly Goddess Myriad Transformations were all out of the question. Su Xiaolan had learned her lesson from last time and had a firm grasp over them, so it was hard to say whether she would be able to protect herself. The heavenly flying phoenix god was being completely dominated by the 5 vermilion birds, the heavenly sword god was being beaten to a pulp by demon emperor Siyu, and the heavenly temperature god was already severely wounded, so he was also being bullied by Michael. The only ones who had a chance to help were the heavenly wood god, the heavenly 100 flowers god, and the heavenly slaughter god. Elsewhere on the battlefield, there was a series of gargantuan trees in a radius of several hundred kilometers that rose up from the ground like spears. 1,000-meter-tall immortal divine monkey shrouded in golden holy fire charged forward, destroying countless trees that were stabbing towards him. He laughed and said, "Little green-haired brat, don't you know that fire is the bane of wood? You want to deal with me with just this little bit of cultivation and awareness?" The heavenly wood god stood on a 30,000 feet tall divine tree. His robes fluttered in the wind, and he looked down calmly at the victorious fighting Buddha, who was pouncing toward him. He couldn't be bothered to speak to the victorious fighting Buddha, as if talking to the victorious fighting Buddha would lower his status. As the divine light above his head shone brightly, he reached out with one hand and clenched his fist. Bam, bam, bam! The earth was torn apart. A series of dark green vines began to ensnare the battling Buddha in a frenzy. "You still refuse to give up? I'm going to burn them all to ashes." Heaven-crushing holy flame explosion. The flames around the battling Buddha's body exploded like the sun, and the extreme holy flames were imbued with heaven-crushing power, instantly incinerating all of the trees within a radius of over 100,000 meters into ashes. The heavenly wood god was right before him. The battling Buddha was just about to leap into the air and unleash a barrage of attacks toward the heavenly wood god when his expression suddenly shifted, and he abruptly swung his golden-banded staff to the side. The dark green vines extending toward him were not afraid of his flames in the slightest, and they tore through the flames with ferocity. There were simply too many of them. After the battling Buddha destroyed the vines on the side, countless vines began to converge toward him from above, in front of him, and behind him before binding him tightly, thereby restricting his movements. Fire counters wood? What a shallow understanding! When the power of the 5 elements is powerful enough, fire can burn water dry, and wood can slice through metal. Of course, wood can also be unafraid of fire. The heavenly wood god looked at the victorious fighting Buddha, who was tied up, and spoke plainly as he formed a hand seal. The battling Buddha discovered that the vines binding his body had become thicker, and the flames around his body were also rapidly decreasing. This is... The battling Buddha's pupils contracted in shock. Are they absorbing the flames I unleashed? He discovered that the vines binding him were like leeches, devouring the flames he unleashed in a frenzy. They began to grow thicker and larger as yellow energy flowed relentlessly within them, and the power binding him also became more and more powerful. He wanted to struggle free of the vines, but the vines before him were impervious to fire and water, and they were even extremely resistant to heaven-crushing power. There was no way he would be able to struggle free in a short time. Have you ever tasted the feeling of being burned by your own flames? The heavenly wood god suddenly chuckled as he pointed a finger at the bound battling Buddha. The vines quickly expanded, and the flame energy within them surged to an extremely dazzling light. The power emanating from them was even more terrifying than when the battling Buddha had unleashed his flames. Boom! An earth-shattering explosion erupted on the ground. Scorching flames incinerated a radius of several hundred kilometers, and the immortal divine monkey was engulfed by the boundless flames. The heavenly wood god was still looking down from above. He released a barrier to block the incoming flames and said calmly, "Wood can produce fire. This attack is a perfect fusion of my wood essence and your power of fire. Even if you are a heavenly disciple candidate, you will be severely injured even if you don't die." However, in the next instant, the heavenly wood god was greeted by the sight of a massive monkey face appearing outside his barrier with a sinister smile on its face. How could this be? Heaven-crushing staff. The golden cudgel was as heavy as 1,000,000,000,000 kilograms. It was filled with extreme power and heaven-crushing true intent. It was as if it wanted to shatter the clouds as it ruthlessly stabbed into the heavenly wood god's barrier, causing his chest to cave in. Boom! The heavenly wood god's eyes widened as its chest caved in, and it threw up a mouthful of blood as it flew through the air. A divine monkey clad in multicolored armor with Buddhist light behind him walked over. His eyes were as resplendent as the sun as he laughed. "Your use of fire is better than mine, but there's one thing you don't know. The thing I'm least afraid of is being burned by fire. I've finally beaten you up, green-furred brat." Didn't you say you weren't interested in my name last time? Do you remember now? The one who beat you up. Heaven-crushing sage. Sun Wukong. Chapter 2055. The heavenly wood god was blasted flying by this sudden attack, and the battling Buddha had already begun to introduce himself as he chased after the heavenly wood god. The heavenly wood god was still not interested in the battling Buddha's self-introduction, but he was astonished by the power that the battling Buddha had just displayed. Heavenly Star Royal Wood. The heavenly wood god faced the battling Buddha, who was brandishing his golden-banded staff over and over again, and he clapped his hands together to summon a series of intertwining black logs. They were extremely dense, and their weight was comparable to that of some small celestial bodies. As they crashed toward the battling Buddha, even the space around them began to warp and tremble. However, the battling Buddha was still able to destroy such a fearsome tree with a single swing of his staff. He was like a true Buddha war god, unstoppable and unstoppable. The heavenly wood god was astonished. This didn't make any sense. When the heavenly temperature god fought the battling Buddha was actually no match for the heavenly temperature god. The heavenly wood god was more powerful than the heavenly temperature god, so why was he having such a difficult time battling the battling Buddha? Could it be that the battling Buddha had used some kind of mystic technique? No, if he had used a mystic technique, he would definitely be able to sense it with his heavenly god senses. Could it be that his cultivation base had increased? No, he was still at the Tao integration pinnacle stage. What was it? What was it that made the battling Buddha suddenly become so powerful? The heavenly wood god surveyed the battlefield to find that not only had the battling Buddha become more powerful, but even Michael and Yun Menjing had also become more powerful. This was not something that could be explained by a sudden increase in power. Did they receive some sort of enhancement? Heaven-crushing staff. A golden cudgel smashed the heavenly star royal wood in front of it and smashed toward the heavenly wood god with boundless power. The heavenly wood god hurriedly used his fist to block the golden cudgel's attack. Immediately, he felt his entire arm shatter from the terrifying force. His body was directly hit by the brute force and smashed into the ground, creating a huge pit. Impossible! How could your strength increase by so much in such a short period of time? The heavenly wood god propped himself up with both hands, trying to stand up with great difficulty. Suddenly, he saw the black lines on the ground. He didn't know where the black lines came from, but he didn't know where they went. They were boundless, and they were perfectly integrated into this world. It was easy to miss them if one didn't pay attention. Could it be? The heavenly wood god thought of a possibility, and a look of shock appeared on his face. At this moment, the battling Buddha had already launched another attack. However, the heavenly wood god stared intently at the black-veined patterns on the ground. Only then did she realize that there seemed to be some kind of invisible power moving and surging into the battling Buddha's body. It was also at this moment that he finally understood why the battling Buddha's power had suddenly increased. It was all because of the sky-splitting formation. That's right, this was the unimaginable super spell formation that the heaven-crushing sect had created in order to crush the heavens. He really didn't expect that this great formation could actually secretly increase the strength of the heavenly suns. This was something that he, the heavenly wood god, had never expected. The great heavenly punishment formation was already disgusting enough, but now, even the great heaven-sundering formation was being used to disgust the heavenly gods? Eat this, green-haired brat! The battling Buddha pounced again while brandishing his monstrous golden-banded staff. The heavenly wood god took the battling Buddha's attack head-on and was forced to retreat again. Ha ha! You're so weak, green-haired little brat. It's been a long time since I've been able to defeat a heavenly god so easily. The battling Buddha suddenly chortled with glee. The heavenly wood god almost threw up a mouthful of blood upon hearing this. Do you really not know whether I'm weak or if you're using a hack? The battling Buddha didn't give the heavenly wood god a chance to speak as he continued to attack the heavenly wood god with his golden-banded staff. That's what you get for flexing. You're so weak, yet you're flexing. Are you blind to my name? I'm going to brand the name of the heaven-crushing great sage, Sun Wukong, into your soul. Boom, 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 heaven and earth trembled violently with his massive golden staff. At this moment, even further away from Yutong City, there were two figures moving at high speed, one in front of the other, beyond the range of vision of the Tao integration stage super mighty figures. The heavenly yin-yang god was fleeing into the distance with all his might, even after unleashing his ultimate movement technique, but Enlin was still able to close the distance between him and the heavenly yin-yang god. What kind of monster is this? How could he be so powerful? It's a nightmare for a heavenly god to encounter him alone. The heavenly yin-yang god's body transformed into a streak of black and white light, which hurtled through the air like a shooting star. However, there was an even more dazzling ball of flames hurtling through the sky behind the streak of light. It was like a devastating meteor, and it was about to crush the meteor mercilessly. You killed Wang Qin. I won't let you get away with this. Enlin spoke with a vicious expression. The heavenly yin-yang god didn't dare to flex like before, and he focused all of his energy on escaping. There's an opening. Enlin suddenly let loose a loud cry as he stomped a foot into the air, and the air around him caved in like a funnel. His body accelerated even further as he slashed two fingers through the air toward the heavenly yin-yang god. A pure golden projection sliced through the heavens. This was the sharpest metal, and it was imbued with paramount nomological laws that could slice through all metals. It landed accurately between the white and black streaks of light, as if it had severed some kind of invisible connection between them. The two streaks of light became unstable before exploding at the same time, revealing the heavenly yin-yang god's true body. The heavenly yin-yang god was shocked. At this moment, Enlin's fist was already crashing down. 5 elemental body. Mountain quaking fist. Boom. A gigantic golden light smashed down. The heavenly yin-yang god let loose a pained cry, and he felt as if something had smashed into his back. Immediately afterward, a boundless power crashed down upon him, and he plummeted from the sky before crashing heavily into the ground. I've finally caught you. A cruel smile appeared on Enlin's face. I'm going to show you who I am and whether I'm worthy enough to make you stop. He descended from the sky with his evil-slaying sword in hand. The heavenly yin-yang god struggled to crawl up from the ground. He held the yin in one hand and the yang in the other before separating them again. A yin-yang formation appeared in the center of the formation, which began to expand toward Enlin. As it was being pushed toward Enlin, it continued to expand at an insane rate, as if it were something that could separate yin and yang in the heavens. Heavenly God Technique, Yin-Yang Heavenly Suspension. At this moment, Enlin saw the yin-yang formation and everything in this world was destroyed. Those who obeyed the yin-yang formation would live, and those who opposed the yin-yang formation would die. What a showy thing. Enlin wielded the evil-slaying sword, and a sky-encompassing darkness burst forth from it as he slashed down toward the yin-yang formation. The absolute dark sword chi actually tore apart the extremely profound yin-yang grand formation without any reason. The heavenly yin-yang god was dumbstruck upon seeing this. How could this be? This is my. Before he could finish his sentence, countless black-veined patterns began to spread through the earth before crawling up the heavenly yin-yang god's body. This was an amalgamation of countless Tao. Rip. The evil-slaying sword slashed down like a black streak of light, cleanly slicing the heavenly yin-yang god in half. Enlin stood before the heavenly yin-yang god like a paragon of Tao. He stood at the center of the countless Tao patterns, and his eyes were imbued with boundless Tao intent. 6 Strikes of the War God Tao Sword. Chapter 2056. Enlin's Tao sword could slice through the Tao, even the great Tao of heaven and earth. After cleanly slicing the sky god Yin Yang in half, he saw the black Tao patterns on the sky god's body that seemed to reach the heavens. It was as if they contained the ultimate true meaning of Yin and Yang. Just the true meaning of the Tao technique that was released inadvertently was enough to make countless cultivators comprehend the Tao. However, Enlin remained completely unfazed. He gripped his evil-slaying sword tightly and slashed it toward the most powerful Tao pattern. Black sparks instantly exploded forth. The heavenly Yin god let loose a wail of extreme agony. This sword strike was aimed directly at his heavenly god's heavenly essence. The two halves of the heavenly Yin god's body were still showing signs of fusing back together. However, this process was now completely halted by Enlin's evil-slaying sword, and countless cracks began to appear on the divine halo above his head. When other heavenly gods were sliced in half or pulverized, they would most likely be able to revive due to the indestructibility of their heavenly god. Even the most powerful of enemies would have to kill the heavenly gods several times before they could kill them. However, Enlin had completely overturned the heavenly Yin god's understanding of this. Enlin was trying to kill the heavenly Yin god with a single sword strike. As long as his black Tao pattern was sliced in half, he would die without a doubt. The heavenly Yin god, who wouldn't care even if Enlin killed him a few times, was truly terrified now. What kind of being had he provoked? If things continued like this, not only would he be unable to lure Enlin to a fixed location, but he wouldn't even be able to buy time. That's right, he was going to be killed by Enlin with a single sword strike. Heavenly Yin God, you've failed, a boundless, primordial voice reverberated throughout the earth. No one knew where this voice had originated from, but it reverberated throughout heaven and earth like an eternal heavenly decree. Enlin had already sliced through the Tao pattern, but his expression changed drastically as if he had sensed something, and he slashed his sword toward the ground. Boom! A deep abyss was torn into the earth. However, a streak of green light dodged Enlin's slash with extreme agility. With a point of his finger, it was as if countless mountains and seas were crashing towards Enlin's chest. Enlin felt as if his entire body was about to be torn apart, and he couldn't even breathe in that instant. A vast power that struck despair surged madly toward him. This was the most fundamental power of a paramount heavenly god. Puff! He spat out a mouthful of blood, and his body flew backward. He smashed through several tall mountains before stopping. A youth with an azure-yellow divine halo and a body that seemed to be made of amber appeared on the ground. He seemed to be sighing as he shook his head. I'm saved. The two halves of heavenly Yin Yang's body fused back together, and the black and white divine halo above his head was like cracked glass, threatening to shatter at any moment. He then seemed to have realized something, and he immediately knelt down with shame on his face as his body trembled. I'm sorry, Heavenly Earth God. I've betrayed your trust, it's all right. Even though this isn't the central location of my trap, it's still enough to kill Enlin, the youth said in an indifferent voice. Enlin crawled out from the rubble on the mountain and spat out a mouthful of blood. An expression of shock appeared on his face upon seeing the Heavenly Earth God. It really is you, Heavenly Earth God. Last time, I couldn't unleash my full power against you due to various considerations, but now I don't have any such reservations. The Heavenly Earth God clasped his hands behind his back. Enlin, you're going to die here. You? I have a lot of trump cards up my sleeves. Enlin smiled. That's right. I can kill you no matter what trump card you use. The Heavenly Earth God's cold voice was imbued with absolute pride as he said, however, I'm not the only one carrying out this mission in order to eliminate all other variables. At this moment, dark clouds suddenly began to gather in the distance, and divine lightning began to rage. A terrifying storm began to surge for over 1,500 kilometers. A voice that was filled with majesty and authority sounded. Ha ha! Enlin, you've been ambushed. This is your doomsday. There was a blue divine halo above his head, and his entire body was a humanoid being materialized from blue liquid. He stood atop a tsunami, and a massive water formation extended for a radius of over 500 kilometers, sealing the space around him with unfathomable power of laws, thereby sealing off Enlin's escape route. Heavenly Sea God. Enlin's lips twitched, and even though he tried his best to maintain a calm expression, he was still unable to disguise the shock and unease in his heart. 2 paramount heavenly gods have been deployed just to kill me? What a grand gesture! I'm the only one who's actually attacking. The heavenly sea god is only standing guard to prevent you from running away or trying to pull any trick. The heavenly earth god had his pride, and he wasn't going to allow 2 paramount heavenly gods to gang up on a return to void stage cultivator. He felt like he was more than enough to take care of Enlin. At the end of the day, Enlin was only a slightly weaker god of creation, so there was no need to go to such lengths. Enlin, I'm going to witness your fall. It's time for you to pay the price for destroying my 1 billion heavenly human eggs, the heavenly sea god said in a menacing voice. Enlin took a deep breath before immediately fleeing into the distance at a speed that was even faster than when he was chasing after the heavenly yin-yang god. 6 strikes of the war god Shadow Tiger. His body transformed into a series of afterimages, and he was even faster than lightning. Not only that, but the heavenly yin-yang god, the heavenly earth god, and the heavenly sea god's visions were all plunged into darkness, and their 5 senses were instantly stripped away. You want to run? Dream on. You've already been lured into the range of my slaughter formation by the heavenly yin-yang god. The heavenly earth god chuckled coldly as he stomped a foot onto the ground. Come out, core of the earth. Rumble, the earth tremored violently. A yellowish-green formation suddenly appeared, encompassing an area with a radius of over 1,000 kilometers. At the same time, at the center of a certain mountain range 400 kilometers away, a purple rhombus-shaped core slowly emerged from the cracked earth before emanating a peculiar energy fluctuation. All of a sudden, the gravitational force of the Earth increased explosively. Just as Enlin was flying through the air, a burst of gravitational force suddenly erupted from the Earth, trying to drag him down into the sky. Not only that, but the purple rhombus-shaped core behind him also unleashed a peerless gravitational force, as if it were a powerful vortex that was trying to suck him in. 10,000 times gravitational force. The heavenly earth god spoke in an indifferent voice. Rumble, an even more powerful gravitational force was exerted upon Enlin's entire body, and he was unable to maintain his shadow tiger form any longer, and he crashed heavily into the ground, creating a massive crater. Did you know? Originally, this earth-killing formation was meant to have you move to the vicinity of the earth core before triggering it. That way, the gravity of the formation would stack with the gravity of the Earth core to produce the greatest power. But now, it's no different. Just the Earth-killing formation alone is enough to suppress you. A faint smile appeared on the heavenly Earth god's face as he looked at Enlin, who was struggling to crawl up from the ground, and he stomped his foot onto the ground again. Gravitational force, 100 million times. Chapter 2057. Boom. The ground had already been reinforced by a special formation, and it suddenly caved in at a rapid rate. Enlin felt as if there were billions of mountains weighing down on his body. Even in his 5-elemental body state, his bones were creaking under the terrifying gravitational force, and they were about to crack and collapse at any moment. Every single cell in his body was being pulverized by the gravitational force. An extreme sense of dizziness and asphyxiation swept over him. Enlin's legs were trembling, and he was about to fall to his knees at any moment. The gravitational force was simply too terrifying, and it could easily reduce a living being to mincemeat. Even a Tao integration stage super mighty figure wouldn't be able to last more than a few seconds under such circumstances. After all, this wasn't a simple stacking of power. This was a gravitational force that had been amplified by hundreds of millions of times. Can you feel that? The power of the earth. A semi-transparent youth made his way toward Enlin with a calm smile on his face. That's right. Killing you is a simple task. He spread open his fingers, and the earth bulged before materializing into a gray stone sword. The stone sword appeared to be quite mundane, but after fusing with the paramount power of the heavenly earth god, it instantly became extremely vast and unfathomable. The heavenly earth god is way too powerful. To think that he was able to subdue Enlin with just a slaughter formation. Heavenly Yin-Yang god was astonished as he looked on from afar. When he was being hunted down by Enlin, he had experienced the terrifying power that Enlin had displayed, and he knew that Enlin was extremely powerful. Even so, Enlin was still unable to withstand the heavenly earth god's slaughter formation. Enlin looked on as the heavenly earth god made his way toward him, and he knew that if he didn't retaliate, he would most likely die here. Die. The heavenly earth god suddenly appeared before Enlin before slashing his gray stone sword toward Enlin's neck. Enlin's expression darkened. 6 jades of authority suddenly appeared around the heavenly earth god's body. The Thunder Dao Jade, the Wind Dao Jade, the Poison Dao Jade, the Fire Dao Jade, the Metal Dao Jade, and the Myriad Dao Jade. At the same time, an earthy divine halo appeared above Enlin's head. Anti-gravity, activate. A purple barrier of light appeared around Enlin's body, and he evaded the heavenly earth god's attack like a phantom. At the same time, boundless golden light erupted from his fingertip as he pointed a finger toward the heavenly earth god's chest. You! The heavenly earth god's pupils contracted. Finger of the heavenly Tao. Enlin let loose an explosive roar, and his finger became the only golden light between heaven and earth, piercing through heaven and earth as it pierced through the heavenly earth god's chest and struck directly into the essence of the earth. Rumble! The golden finger light tore apart the earth for hundreds of miles ahead. Countless mountains were annihilated into dust. The golden light dimmed. Tiny cracks had already appeared on the heavenly earth god's chest. Enlin was about to launch his next attack when he suddenly saw a fist in front of him. It kept growing bigger in his field of vision. In an instant it was bigger than a mountain and bigger than the earth. It gave him a feeling that he couldn't dodge it at all. Even blocking it was an extravagant hope. It was as if he would be crushed into powder by this fist in the next second. You're trying to scare me with a paramount heavenly god power again. Enlin's eyes suddenly became pure golden as invisible ripples proliferated forth. A mighty and invincible figure appeared before the heavenly earth god's eyes. Super divine might technique. Enlin had broken through the heavenly earth god's attack, and his opponent was momentarily dazed. Enlin took advantage of this split second to retaliate, and boundless golden light erupted from his fist. Fist of the heavenly Tao. The pinnacle power of the 5 elemental body combined with the heaven-crushing technique could be described as devastating. This fist clashed with the heavenly earth god's fist, and space within a radius of over 50 kilometers was instantly blasted open. Enlin's arm was unable to withstand the heavenly earth god's power of the earth, and it became extremely red, looking as if it could explode at any moment. The heavenly earth god was also having a hard time. Enlin's attack was also extremely powerful, and he was forced into retreat. It looked like the two of them were evenly matched. However, a smile suddenly appeared on Enlin's face. Blast him to death. Around the heavenly earth god's body, the 6 heavenly god jades that had accumulated enough power exploded. All of a sudden, violent blades of lightning, lethal poison mist, extreme scorching temperatures, all-encompassing attacks, and a metallic storm all crashed down upon the heavenly earth god like a torrential downpour. Boom, boom, boom. Heaven and earth had been reduced to a realm of destruction. This was the equivalent of 6 heavenly gods attacking the heavenly earth god at the same time. Heavenly earth god. The heavenly yin-yang god's expression shifted drastically upon seeing this. At the same time, he turned toward the heavenly sea god. Earth is in trouble. Why aren't you going to provide reinforcements? The heavenly sea god didn't move in the slightest upon hearing this. Instead, a faint smile appeared on his face. If Earth really is going to be defeated like this, then there's no point in us continuing this battle. Unlin took advantage of the opening created by the explosions to hurtle back in retreat toward a certain basin. The heavenly earth god emerged from the explosion completely unscathed. A mysterious rainbow crystal armor had appeared around his body, making him appear extremely dazzling and dreamy under the sunlight. Using the heavenly mountain's laws of gravity to defend against my formation's crushing gravity is not a bad idea. The heavenly earth god looked at Unlin with a faint smile. But don't forget that I am the paramount being here. This so-called heavenly mountain is only a heavenly mountain that I have manifested, billion times the gravity. The heavenly earth god stomped a foot onto the ground. Boom! A power that was 10 times more terrifying than before swept forth. Unlin was struck by an even more unbearable power. The purple barrier around his body began to tremor violently, as if it were about to explode at any moment. Everything around him began to cave in toward the ground. The heavenly earth god was just about to unleash a final attack when he suddenly detected Unlin's location. This location, the corner of his mouth couldn't help but twitch as he looked at the continuously sinking basin. Was this a coincidence? How had Unlin managed to escape to this place within the formation? How was he so lucky that he managed to escape to the hidden core of the earth-killing formation? This was where the energy of a mighty figure converged. A normal person would think that the core of the earth-killing formation was the purple rhomboid crystal known as the core of the earth, and they would try to destroy it. If they were to do that, they would definitely fall into the most perilous region of the formation and be killed by both the earth-killing formation and the core of the earth. No one would have thought that the core of the earth-killing formation was actually located right beneath this mundane basin. The heavenly earth god felt like he had already constructed the formation to the point where even a god of creation wouldn't be able to see through it. It was definitely a coincidence that Unlin had come here. He had to get out of here as soon as possible. The heavenly earth god hesitated momentarily before deciding to delay his final attack in order to give Unlin a chance to retaliate and lure him away from this place before killing him. Otherwise, he would be in deep trouble if he accidentally destroyed the core of the formation. Sure enough, Unlin overcame the gravitational pull and stood up with great difficulty. Oh? 1,000,000,000 times the gravitational pull is still not enough to crush you? Impressive. The heavenly earth god praised in an indifferent voice as he silently cheered Unlin on in his heart. What are you waiting for? I'll give you one last chance to retaliate. However, right at this moment, Unlin did something that completely caught him off guard. It's just gravitational pull. I'm going to break you. He let loose an enraged roar as his aura soared to an extremely terrifying level. At the same time, a black granular object appeared at the center of his palm, as if it were the source of Tao, the source of destruction, and it was as if it could destroy all things. 8th Heaven Crushing Technique, Dark Tao Child. Chapter 2058. The 8th Heaven Crushing Technique, Tao of Darkness. Not only was this technique imbued with the purest power of heaven crushing, but it was also imbued with the paramount true intent of creation and destruction. It used the essence of Tao to destroy the heavens, and the destructive power it produced was many times more powerful than all of the other heaven-crushing techniques. This move was the most destructive move among all the top-grade heaven-crushing techniques. The ancient Dragon Empress didn't dare to use this technique as it was very difficult and very taxing to unleash. Furthermore, the spell technique was far too terrifying, and it could easily result in the deaths of all living beings in a city or even a kingdom. However, Unlin had no such concerns. There were only enemies within a radius of over 500 kilometers. The speck of darkness quickly expanded, destroying and engulfing everything around it. Regardless of whether it was matter, space, or invisible Tao, everything was engulfed by the darkness. It expanded like an explosion, as if it were going to engulf the entire heaven and earth. Stop! The heavenly earth god was finally in a panic, and he launched a ferocious fist toward Enlin in an attempt to destroy the Tao of darkness before him. Perhaps Enlin was planning to use a powerful technique to destroy his slaughter formation, which was why he had used the Taoist of darkness. If he had unleashed the Tao of darkness elsewhere in the formation, the heavenly earth god wouldn't have panicked in the slightest. If he could destroy the earth-killing formation, then he would concede defeat. However, Enlin, who had been forced into a corner, decided to go all out and unleash a powerful technique to destroy the spell formation on the spot. Coincidentally, the basin he was standing in was the hidden core of the earth-killing formation, as well as the weakest point of the formation. What the F***ck? What kind of bullsh**t luck was this? How could there be such a coincidence? The heavenly earth god was extremely astonished, and his fist was imbued with the purest power of the earth as it hurtled toward the Tao of darkness. The Tao of darkness caved in like a rubber ball, but it was still unable to stop its power from proliferating outward in a frenzy. Boom! It was as if a massive black sun had exploded upon the earth. Countless materials were first blasted far away by the shockwave, and then they were sucked back by a terrifying suction force, merging into the darkness and going to an unknown place. A crisp and clear explosion rang out. A series of inky black cracks suddenly appeared on the surface of the purple crystal. No! The heavenly earth god's eyes widened. Bang! The crystal shattered, turning into specks of purple light. The shattering of the earth core signified the complete collapse of the earth-killing formation. The heavenly earth god's top-notch killing formation had been broken by Enlin's powerful technique just like that. This was PFFF. The heavenly earth god threw up a mouthful of golden liquid and panted heavily. The powerful backlash from the destruction of the formation had caused him to suffer significant injuries. Heavenly earth god. The heavenly sea god's expression shifted drastically. Are you all right? Do you need help? The heavenly earth god shook his head with an enraged expression. A white-robed figure quickly walked out of the huge crater in the ground. His appearance was elegant, and his white clothes were spotless. He was like an elegant young master in the mortal world, and his bearing was extremely indifferent and otherworldly. He was Enlin. Heavenly Earth God, your top-tier killing formation is only SOSO. It can't even take a single strike from my Tao child of darkness. A disdainful smile appeared on Enlin's face. The Heavenly Earth God almost threw up another mouthful of blood upon hearing this. If it weren't for the fact that you had some dog**t luck, and just so happened to unleash your most powerful technique at the core of the earth-killing formation, would my formation have been broken? However, the Heavenly Earth God was not going to explain things like this in order to save face, so he could only swallow his indignation as he glowered at the man before him with an enraged expression. I'm going to crush you in the most direct way, the youth spoke in a cold voice. What a coincidence, that's exactly what I was thinking. Enlin replied with a smile. The 6 heavenly god jades returned to his side as a divine halo shimmered above his head. Armor of mountain, armor of wind, armor of lightning, armor of metal, armor of fire, armor of myriad manifestations, and armor of poison. The 7 heavenly god jades combined to form his new set of armor. The heavenly earth god had a mysterious rainbow suit, while he had 7 sets of heavenly god jade. Let's see who's tougher. It had to be said that this was quite an intimidating formation, and even the heavenly earth god couldn't help but take a few extra glances. However, he soon regained his composure. Whoosh! Enlin's body flashed as he charged toward the heavenly earth god before unleashing a devastating fist toward his face. The heavenly earth god tilted his head slightly to the side, and he easily evaded Enlin's attack as the space beside him shattered like a pane of glass. While he was evading, He had already unleashed a palm toward Enlin's chest. Enlin's punch was only a feint. The real killing technique was his leg, and he spun around before unleashing a vicious kick toward the heavenly earth god's waist. Foot of the heavenly Tao. The heavenly earth god's palm struck one of the 7 heavenly god jades. Enlin's foot also struck the heavenly earth god's rainbow crystal suit. Boom! An earth-shattering explosion of energy erupted. Enlin's foot seemed to be able to shatter the stars as boundless power erupted from his foot. The new 5-elemental power had been fused into his heaven-crushing true intent, and there was nothing in this world that could resist it. Even the rainbow crystal suit was beginning to crack open. However, at the same time, Enlin's 7 heavenly god jades also began to tremor violently, as if they had encountered some extremely terrifying power. Even the power of the laws of the heavenly Tao was about to be completely subdued. Let me show you what it means to be paramount. The heavenly earth god stomped his foot and exerted force with his palm again. In that instant, the boundless power of the earth surged toward the heavenly earth god's palm. The earth was as far as the eye could see, and so was the earth. The paramount heavenly god represented absolute power. Enlin could feel that his armor of the heavenly gods was quickly crumbling. His palm had broken through all 7 of the heavenly gods, and a terrifying power crashed down upon his chest, making him feel as if he were truly filled with boundless power. His chest caved in from the force, and the sound of bones cracking erupted. Boom! Bright red blood mixed with flesh and blood exploded. Enlin's eyes widened, and a bloody hole appeared in his chest. He didn't even have a chance to continue attacking before his body was knocked flying for over 50 kilometers again. The heavenly earth god stroked his shattered rainbow crystal suit, upon which it began to heal at a rate discernible to the naked eye. At the same time, he stomped his feet into the air and continued to chase after Enlin. Enlin knew that it wasn't that his armor was inferior to the heavenly earth gods. From a defensive standpoint, his 7-layered heavenly god jades were about the same as the heavenly earth god's crystal suit. The main difference lay in their offensive prowess. That's right, the heavenly earth god's palm was even more powerful than his 5-elemental body and kick of the heavenly Tao. Before Enlin had a chance to recover from his injuries, the heavenly earth god had already launched another attack. The heavenly earth god wasn't going to give his enemies any chance to catch their breath. Boom, boom, boom. His fists crashed toward Enlin like a series of continents. If a normal return to void stage mighty figure were to face these fists, their bodies would explode before they could even land. In the face of this ferocious onslaught, Enlin was only able to defend against a dozen or so fists before his limbs were completely mutilated, and he had almost lost the ability to move. The flesh on his chest was quickly mended by the 5-elemental power, but it was punctured again before it could even complete the mending process. The heavenly earth god's speed and power were all enhanced by the boundless earth, thereby making them even more powerful. Enlin's insane regenerative abilities were completely unable to keep up with the heavenly earth god's rate of destruction. If things continued like this, he was going to be pummeled to death. Chapter 2059. The heavenly earth god's entire body was enshrouded by a layer of greenish-yellow light. This was his power of the heavenly gods, which allowed him to continuously absorb the power of the earth. Boom, boom, boom. One clash after another. The heavens were shattering. The earth was trembling. Heaven and earth within a radius of several thousand kilometers had been transformed into a realm of death. This was the battlefield for Enlin and the heavenly earth god. Heavenly god Yin Yang was struck by the shock waves from the heavenly earth god's fist once, and he almost perished on the spot, upon which he hurriedly retreated. The heavenly sea god had no choice but to expand his tsunami cage in order to avoid being struck by the shock waves from their attack. Enlin finally experienced what it was like when the heavenly earth god unleashed his full power. This was a power that struck despair into one's heart. This was a boundless power with no end in sight, and every single cell in his body was trembling in fear. It was as if battling against the heavenly Earth God was like battling against the entire Earth. Even though the heavenly Earth God had been wounded by the backlash from the formation, he was still able to crush Enlil with ease. The heavenly Earth God unleashed a palm toward Enlil, and the projection of a golden continent instantly appeared in the sky before mercilessly crushing Enlil into the ground, trying to crush Enlil into a pancake. Without any delay, he pulled out a golden spear from the ground and pointed the tip of the spear toward Enlil. Earth Vein Slaying Spear, go! Whoosh! The spear tore through space before crashing directly toward Enlil's head. This was a killing spear that contained the power of the veins of the earth. It was refined and condensed from the essence of the earth's power into an extremely penetrative killing weapon. Not only did it contain a vast amount of earth's power, it could also sense the rhythm of a pulse. It was as if it had a life of its own, causing the killing spear to become even more agile and powerful. A boundless sense of impending doom had already engulfed Enlil's entire body. Enlil was being crushed by the two continents, and he was completely unable to evade. Was his head going to explode? Rest in peace. He suddenly let loose a loud cry. A blue consciousness suddenly flew out from his body, holding a massive black brick in its hands as it positioned itself in front of the Earth Vein Slaughter Spear. Rip! An extremely sharp sound erupted from the point of collision between the black brick and the Earth Vein Killing Spear. Waves of golden splendor erupted from the Earth's energy, shooting out like bolts of lightning. However, they were unable to break through this low-profile and reserved black brick. Enlil possessed power comparable to that of a god of creation stage mighty figure to begin with, and he was able to hold his own against the heavenly Earth God's most powerful attack with the help of the black brick. Enlil also took advantage of this opportunity to break through the golden earth move and soared into the sky. Moreover, he used the gap in the battle to quickly heal the injuries on his body with the 5 elements battle body. In just a few seconds, the bloody hole in his chest and his twisted and broken limbs were restored to their original state. The 5 elemental bodies' nature-defying regenerative abilities and astonishing combat endurance were also the reasons why he dared to battle the heavenly Earth God. One had to realize that he had battled the god of creation stage heavenly monarch Bei Luo for 3 days and 3 nights before forcing the latter to flee. A god of creation stage consciousness. To think that it can split its spirit body into 2 and fight together. The heavenly Earth God's expression darkened even further as he made another divine seal. Paramount Heavenly God Technique. Earth Eternal Guardian. All of a sudden, the earth began to tremor violently. 5 rock monsters materialized from the ground. These were the Metal Heavenly Wolf, Ghost Vine Tree Monster, Lava Giant, Giant Rock Crocodile, and Liquid Octopus. All of these monsters had divine halos shimmering above their heads, which were imbued with the purest power of the earth and exuded a power that was countless times more terrifying than that of a Tao integration stage mythological beast. Roar! The Metal Heavenly Wolf waved its 6 claws through the air, and 6 silver heavenly blades tore through the earth, creating 6 abyss-like rifts that extended into infinity and beyond. Enlil's eyelids twitched upon seeing the Metal Heavenly Wolf's casual attack. This Heavenly Wolf seemed to have already transcended the Tao integration stage, and now, there were 5 more opponents of this caliber? I'm not afraid of you when it comes to numbers. If you have 1 more consciousness body, then I have 5 more guardians. The Heavenly Earth God grinned before waving a hand through the air. Go and take Enlil's head. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. One monster after another tore through space before pouncing toward Enlil and the consciousness Enlil. Countless black, ghostly vines began to entangle toward divine sense Enlil, and they were like bolts of black lightning. There were black spikes on their surfaces, and there were countless shrieking faces of primordial ghosts on the surface of their bodies. White Tiger Soul Blade. The consciousness Enlil reacted extremely quickly, and he unleashed a series of golden blade projections that were imbued with his essential soul power. Each of these blade projections was imbued with the true essence of the white tiger's essential divine intent, and they possessed God of creation stage power that could slice through all types of techniques. However, attacks of this caliber only managed to slice through the black ghost vines, upon which a sharp screeching sound erupted. There was also a hint of the power of the heavenly earth god that was keeping the wind blades at bay. In the end, only half of the ghost vines were severed. The other half of the ghost vines continued to attack divine Sense and Lin, dragging their broken vines behind them. So he really does possess God of creation stage power? The consciousness in Lin's expression darkened as he continued to swing his white tiger golden blade to slice through the oncoming vines one by one. At this moment, a scorching lava giant roared from the side, and each of its fists was as destructive as a flaming meteor. Meanwhile, the silvery white metal heavenly wolf tore through space before pouncing toward the physical body in Lin. And Lin clenched his fists tightly as he also charged toward the metal heavenly wolf. At the same time, energy surged and accumulated in his right arm in a frenzy, and his aura soared explosively. Howl! The metal heavenly wolf's claws were like the sharpest heavenly blades as they slashed toward Unlin's chest. However, in order to maximize the power of this punch, Unlin didn't even try to dodge. Instead, he also unleashed a punch toward the metal heavenly wolf. The silvery white heavenly blade crashed into Unlin's chest, and 6 bloody gashes appeared on his body of the war god. Unlin's fist had already landed firmly on the metal heavenly wolf's head. Fist of the heavenly Tao. 6 times 5 elemental Kirin arm. Unlin's fist was imbued with extreme heaven-crushing power, and it crashed heavily into the metal heavenly wolf's head, causing its indestructible head to cave in. At the same time, the power of the 5 elemental elements flowed into the metal head. Bam! The metal heavenly wolf's head exploded. Insta-kill with a single punch. There were too many enemies, so what Unlin had to do was to strike first and weaken the enemy's numbers. Unlin's decision was undoubtedly the correct one. However, when the metal skywolf's body smashed into the ground, the rocks on the ground suddenly surged up to its head. Then, boundless power of the earth poured into the metal skywolf's body. With the help of the earth, its head grew back. Howl! The revived metal heavenly wolf raised its head and let loose a mocking roar at Unlin. This thing can be revived? Unlin's flesh crawled. He had unleashed all of his power and didn't hold back in the slightest. He had only just insta-killed one of these enemies, only to have it crawl back up in the blink of an eye? You don't seem to understand what the eternal guardians of the earth represent. The heavenly earth god stood silently on the spot with a smile on his face. As long as the earth doesn't die, they will exist forever. In other words, they are all immortal. Hence, just accept your fate, Unlin. There are 5 immortal god of creation stage gods here. Are they not enough to kill you?